The night at Hogwarts was still, the flickering torches in the corridors throwing long shadows against the cold stone walls. Harry Potter sat in the Gryffindor common room with Hermione Granger, both bent over a large pile of books scattered across the table. Their voices were low, their focus sharp, as they discussed the growing threat of Voldemort's return. Hermione's brow was furrowed, her quill scratching furiously across parchment as she jotted down notes about defensive spells. Harry leaned back, rubbing his scar, which had been aching more often than usual. Though the fire crackled warmly behind them, there was an air of unease that clung to the room. Ron Weasley sat apart from them, his posture slouched and his eyes fixed on the fire. His mind wandered far from books and spells. It had been happening for weeks now, this growing rift between him and his two best friends. It began small, just little arguments over homework or Quidditch strategies, but now the cracks ran deeper. Hermione glanced toward him. She tried to include Ron in the discussions, but more often than not, he brushed her off with a grumble or avoided answering altogether. Tonight was no different. "We need to stay alert," Hermione said firmly, closing one of the heavy tomes with a snap. "There's no telling when Voldemort might move again. If Harry's scar is aching, it's a warning sign." Ron gave a dry laugh, sharp and bitter. "Right, because everything comes down to Harry, doesn't it? Always Harry, always the special one." Harry blinked at him in surprise, taken aback by the venom in Ron's tone. Hermione's eyes widened, her lips parting as if to speak, but Ron pushed himself off the couch before she could. "I'm going to bed," he muttered, his voice clipped. He didn't look at either of them as he stormed up the boys' staircase, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. Hermione pressed her lips together, concern flickering in her eyes. "Something's wrong with him," she whispered. Harry shook his head. "He's just tired. Maybe stressed about exams." But his words sounded weak even to himself. He knew Ron. He knew when something ran deeper. That night, while Harry slept fitfully, plagued by strange dreams of dark corridors and whispering voices, Ron lay awake in his bed. He stared at the canopy above him, anger twisting inside his chest. He thought of how Harry always seemed to shine in the spotlight, how Hermione always chose Harry's side when arguments arose, how his own family constantly compared him to his famous friend. For the first time, Ron wondered what it would be like to step out of Harry Potter's shadow. The following days brought more tension. Harry and Hermione grew closer in their efforts to prepare for what lay ahead, while Ron drifted further away. During meals in the Great Hall, he often sat in silence, poking at his food while his friends whispered urgently about their plans. It was during one such evening that a figure approached Ron. He was sitting alone near the end of the Gryffindor table when a Slytherin student slid onto the bench beside him. Ron stiffened immediately, his wand hand twitching, but the boy raised his hands in mock surrender. "Easy, Weasley. I'm not here for a fight." It was Theodore Nott, sharp-eyed and quiet, someone who rarely drew attention but always seemed to know more than he should. "What do you want?" Ron muttered. Nott leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hear you're tired of living in Potter's shadow. You're not the only one. There are people out there, powerful people, who think Harry Potter's reign as the hero needs to end." Ron's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about you-know-who." Nott smirked. "Maybe. Maybe not. But opportunities don't come often, Weasley. And from what I can see, Potter doesn't value you the way you deserve." Ron's chest tightened. He wanted to snap back, to tell Nott he was wrong, but deep down the words struck a chord. Harry had the glory, Hermione had the brains, and Ron, what did he have? He shoved away from the table, muttering, "I'm not interested." But the seed had already been planted. That night, he found himself replaying Nott's words over and over. Opportunities don't come often. The days passed, and with each one Ron felt the invisible wall between him and his friends growing taller. Hermione noticed, of course. She tried to reach out, tried to pull him back in, but her words only seemed to make him retreat further. Harry was too caught up in his nightmares and the burden of his scar to see clearly what was happening. And then came the night when everything changed. Harry and Hermione had been summoned to Dumbledore's office to discuss recent attacks reported in the Daily Prophet. Ron, excluded once again, sat alone in the common room, bitterness coiling through him like a serpent. That was when the fire flared green, and a voice whispered from the flames. "Weasley, Ron's head jerked up. The voice was cold, commanding, yet oddly soothing. He knew it instantly, though he had never heard it directly before. Voldemort. Ron's heart pounded in his chest. What do you want? I want what you want, the voice replied smoothly. To be seen. To be valued. To step out of Harry Potter's shadow. He has everything while you are nothing more than his sidekick. But it does not have to be that way. Ron's throat felt dry. Why should I trust you? Because I can give you power, Voldemort hissed. I can make you more than just the Weasley boy. Stand with me, and I will make sure the world never forgets your name. Ron swallowed hard, torn between fear and temptation. He thought of his family, of Hermione's constant scolding, of Harry always standing at the center of attention. The fire flickered, casting eerie shadows across his face as he whispered the words that would set everything into motion. What do I have to do? The flames twisted, the voice curling around him like smoke. Betray them. The words lingered in Ron's mind long after the fire in the Gryffindor common room dimmed back to its usual warm glow. Betray them. The command echoed inside him like a whispering curse, and no matter how hard he tried to shake it, the thought refused to leave. He told himself he wasn't serious, that he was only listening because he was curious, because he was angry. But the truth was darker than he dared admit. When Harry and Hermione returned from Dumbledore's office later that night, they were animated with urgency. Hermione clutched her notes tightly, her eyes flashing as she recounted what Dumbledore had told them. Harry looked pale, his jaw set, the scar on his forehead faintly red. There have been more attacks, Hermione said breathlessly as they sank into the chairs by the fire. Dumbledore believes Death Eaters are moving again. He wants us to be prepared. Harry, he thinks they're after you more directly now. Harry gave a grim nod. It's been getting worse. I keep dreaming about a dark hall like a corridor in the Ministry. I think Voldemort's planning something big. Ron sat nearby, his fists clenched on his knees. He should have felt concern, fear even. But instead there was a sick twist of jealousy in his stomach. Even now, at this moment of danger, it was all about Harry. Always Harry. He looked at Hermione and saw the way she leaned forward, her eyes fixed only on Harry, her entire attention on him. Ron forced himself to speak, his tone sharper than he intended. So what's Dumbledore expect us to do then? Just follow you around, hoping we don't get killed in the process. Hermione's head snapped toward him, shocked. Ron, that's not fair. We're all in this together. Dumbledore trusts all of us. Harry frowned, his eyes narrowing slightly. Ron, what's wrong with you lately? You've been acting like... He trailed off, but the suspicion in his voice was clear. Ron's ears burned hot. Like what? Like I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter? You don't get it, Harry. You never have to. You're Harry Potter. You don't know what it's like being second best in your own family, let alone your friends. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Hermione reached for him, her voice softer now. Ron, that's not true. You matter to us. More than you realize. But Ron pulled away, standing abruptly. Forget it. You wouldn't understand. Without another word, he stormed up to the dormitory, leaving Harry and Hermione staring after him with worry etched across their faces. That night, Ron couldn't sleep. The whispers came again. He wasn't sure if it was the fire, his own mind, or Voldemort himself somehow reaching him. But the message was always the same. Betray them and you'll be free. Betray them and you'll have power. The next day unfolded in uneasy silence between the trio. Classes passed with little conversation. Hermione buried herself in her books, Harry seemed distracted by his scar, and Ron brooded in silence, his mind a storm. By evening, he found himself wandering alone through the castle corridors, his footsteps echoing faintly. He ended up near the dungeons, where he shouldn't have been when a voice called out. Weasley. It was Theodore Nott again, leaning casually against a wall. This time he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Draco Malfoy, smirking in that familiar, arrogant way. Lost your way to the library? Malfoy sneered. Ron glared. What do you want? Nott stepped forward smoothly. Only to talk. The Dark Lord, he sees potential in you. You could rise higher than you ever imagined. You're wasting your time chasing after Potter. Ron's wand hand twitched, but he didn't raise it. Something in Nott's tone kept him rooted. He wanted to deny it, wanted to shout that he'd never betray Harry and Hermione. But when he opened his mouth, no words came out. Malfoy chuckled, his eyes gleaming. Figures. Always the sidekick. Always following someone else. Guess the Dark Lord misjudged you after all. He turned to leave, but Ron spoke before he could stop himself. I'm not a sidekick. The words came out low and fierce, but they made Malfoy stop in his tracks. He glanced back, his smirk deepening. Prove it, Weasley. The challenge burned in Ron's chest long after they walked away. That night in the common room, Harry tried again to bridge the gap. He sat beside Ron, his voice hesitant. Look, Ron. I don't know what's going on, but we need you. I need you. Hermione, too. Whatever's bothering you, we can work it out together. For a brief moment, Ron almost gave in. He almost confessed everything, the whispers, the temptations, the way he felt like a shadow. But then Hermione came over, placing her hand gently on Harry's arm, her eyes full of concern as she looked at him. And just like that, the jealousy surged back. You'll be fine without me, Ron muttered, pushing himself to his feet. You always are. He left before they could stop him. Hours later, long after the castle had gone quiet, Ron sat alone by the fire once more. The flames shifted suddenly, turning green, and the voice returned. You hesitate, but I see your heart. You are ready. They will never see you as more than a sidekick. With me, you will rise above them all. Ron's face was pale in the glow, but his eyes hardened. He thought of his family, always overshadowed by Bill's brilliance, Charlie's daring, Percy's ambition, the twins' success, Ginny's talent. He thought of Harry, always the chosen one, always the center of attention. He thought of Hermione, who never seemed to truly see him the way she saw Harry. Tell me what to do, Ron whispered, his voice trembling but resolute. The fire seemed to pulse with approval. Soon, Voldemort hissed. Soon you will have your chance. And when you take it, you will be mine. And though fear clawed at his chest, Ron didn't back away. He had already taken the first step. The castle grounds glistened under a pale sun the next morning, but Ron hardly noticed. He moved through the day as if caught in a fog, his mind circling endlessly around the words from the fire. Soon, the weight of it pressed against him, filling him with both dread and anticipation. Every time Harry laughed at something Hermione said, every time they spoke in hushed voices about plans and dangers, Ron felt the distance between them grow wider. Classes came and went, but Ron barely absorbed a thing. In potions, Snape's cold drawl cut through the room as he stalked past their table. Weasley, perhaps if you spent less time daydreaming and more time focusing, your concoction might resemble an actual potion instead of swamp water. The class chuckled, and Ron's cheeks burned red. Harry opened his mouth to defend him, but Ron snapped his book shut and muttered, Save it, Harry. Hermione frowned but said nothing, her quill scratching frantically as if writing faster might hide her discomfort. That night in the common room, Harry tried again. Ron, what's going on with you? You're not yourself. Ron stared at the fire, his jaw tight. Maybe this is myself. Maybe you've just never noticed. Hermione sat up straighter, alarm flashing in her eyes. Ron, that's not true. We've always. But Ron cut her off sharply. You've always noticed Harry. You've always listened to him, followed him, trusted him. And what about me? When have I ever been anything but the one tagging along? Hermione's lips parted as if to argue, but the words seemed to falter. Harry looked stunned, hurt even, but before he could speak, Ron stood and walked away. He didn't sleep that night. He tossed and turned in his bed until he couldn't take it anymore and slipped quietly out of the dormitory. The corridors were dark, the portraits snoring softly, but Ron moved with purpose, guided by a pull he couldn't explain. His feet carried him toward the dungeons once more, where the shadows seemed thicker, darker. Waiting there, just beyond the reach of torchlight, was Theodore Knott. You came, Knott said, his voice low, almost pleased. Ron swallowed hard. I'm not promising anything. I need to know what he wants from me. Knott smirked. He wants what you want. Recognition. Power. Freedom. He doesn't see you as a shadow. He sees you as an equal. Ron's heart thudded painfully. And how do I know this isn't some trick? From behind Knott, Draco Malfoy stepped forward, his expression smug but his eyes calculating. Because he chose you. He doesn't waste his time on people who don't matter. You should be honored. Ron bristled at Malfoy's tone, but didn't walk away. Instead, he clenched his fists, torn between fury and curiosity. What do I have to do? Ron asked finally. Not leaned closer, his words smooth and deliberate. You don't need to do anything yet. Just watch them. Listen to them. Bring us what you learn. Every secret Potter and Granger keep, every plan they make, bring it to us. Show the Dark Lord your worth. Ron's stomach twisted. Spying. Betrayal. The thought of turning against his friends made bile rise in his throat. But the temptation was there too, whispering insidiously. What had Harry or Hermione ever really given him, aside from being the one always left in the shadows? Think about it, Nott said, sensing his hesitation. The Dark Lord rewards loyalty with greatness. Imagine proving once and for all that you're not just Potter's sidekick. Imagine being the one people remember. When Ron finally returned to the common room, the fire had burned low. He stood there, staring into the embers torn in two. The following days tested him more than he could have imagined. Harry's scar continued to ache, his dreams more vivid and disturbing. Hermione worked tirelessly at his side, researching countercurses and strategies late into the night. And Ron hovered at the edge of it all, silently watching. It was during one such evening that Harry slipped up. Exhausted, his voice cracked as he muttered, "It's the Department of Mysteries. That's where Voldemort wants me to go." Hermione looked alarmed. "Harry, are you sure?" "Yes," Harry said firmly. "I've seen it again and again in my dreams. A black door at the end of a corridor. He's after something there. I think it's a weapon." Ron sat in silence, his heart pounding. He knew this was the kind of information Voldemort wanted. He knew carrying it to Nott would prove his value. His hands trembled slightly as he pretended to flip through his notes, but his mind was already racing. Later that night, when Harry and Hermione finally drifted off to bed, Ron lingered behind. He stared at the fire until his resolve hardened, then slipped away. Down in the dungeons, the shadows waited. Nott and Malfoy appeared again, as if they had expected him. "Well?" Nott asked, his eyes sharp. Ron's voice shook, but he forced the words out. "He's been dreaming of the Department of Mysteries. A weapon. That's where Voldemort's planning something." For a long moment, there was silence. Then Nott's lips curled into a thin smile. "You've done well, Weasley." "Very well." Malfoy chuckled darkly. "Maybe you're not so useless after all." But Ron didn't smile. His stomach churned, his chest tight. He had crossed a line, one he could never uncross. As he walked back to the common room, the weight of what he'd done pressed down on him. He told himself it didn't matter, that Harry and Hermione would never understand anyway, that this was his chance to finally be someone. But deep down, a flicker of guilt gnawed at him, faint but relentless. For the first time in his life, Ron Weasley had betrayed his friends. The next morning dawned bright and crisp, but Ron's world felt heavier than ever. He sat at the Gryffindor table in the Great Hall, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate, while Harry and Hermione whispered urgently about their defense against the dark arts assignment. Their voices blended into a low hum that barely reached him. Every word reminded him of the secret he carried, the secret he had already passed on. Guilt pressed against his ribs like a weight. He tried to remind himself of what Nott had said, that Voldemort saw his worth, that this was his chance to prove himself. But the image of Harry's determined face and Hermione's kind eyes gnawed at him relentlessly. At breakfast, owls swooped overhead. A Daily Prophet dropped onto Hermione's lap, the bold headline screaming of another attack. Death Eaters strike in Diagon Alley. 3 missing. Ministry denies escalation. Hermione gasped softly, her hands trembling as she read. Harry leaned closer, his expression grim. "They're getting bolder," Harry muttered. "It's only going to get worse." Ron looked away, shame burning his throat. He had helped. Maybe not directly, but the information he'd given Nott would find its way to Voldemort. He had played a part in this chaos. By the time classes ended, Ron was unraveling. His hands shook as he tried to write in charms, his wand slipped twice during Transfiguration, and even Hermione's gentle nudges couldn't bring him back into focus. That evening, when Harry suggested more practice in the room of requirement, Ron found himself making excuses. "You two go ahead," he muttered. "I've got homework." Hermione frowned but didn't argue. Harry looked troubled, clearly wanting to push, but in the end he let it go. Together, they disappeared into the corridors, leaving Ron alone once more. He didn't return to the common room right away. Instead, he wandered, his feet carrying him toward the dungeons again. The air grew colder as he descended, the stones slick and damp beneath his fingers. He told himself he didn't want to go, that he could still walk away. But by the time he reached the shadowy corner where Not usually waited, he knew he had already chosen. Not was there, as always, with Malfoy lounging nearby. Both of them looked expectant, like hunters waiting for prey. "Well, Weasley," Not asked softly, "have you thought about what we discussed?" Ron hesitated, his throat dry. "I already told you about the Department of Mysteries. Isn't that enough?" Malfoy smirked. "Information is only the beginning. The Dark Lord doesn't need snitches. He needs loyalty. Prove you're not afraid to go further." Ron's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Not stepped closer, his eyes gleaming. "The next time Potter or Granger plan something, anything, you make sure we know first. And when the time comes, when the Dark Lord asks for more than whispers, you stand with him. Against them." The words made Ron's chest tighten painfully. Against them. He thought of Harry's stubborn bravery, Hermione's fierce loyalty, the countless times they had stood together against impossible odds. Could he really turn his back on them so completely? Malfoy leaned in, his voice a sharp whisper. "Face it, Weasley. They'll never choose you. You'll always be in Potter's shadow, watching Granger look at him like he's the only one who matters. You're nothing to them. But to the Dark Lord, you could be everything." Ron flinched at the truth hidden in Malfoy's words. He had seen it, Hermione's eyes lighting up when Harry spoke, the way she hung on his every word, the way she trusted him more than anyone else. He had always wondered if she could ever look at him like that. But she never had. His voice came out low, shaking slightly. "And if I refuse?" Not's smile faded, his expression turning cold. "Then you stay in the shadows forever. Forgotten. Replaceable. Just another Weasley." The word cut deeper than Ron expected. Replaceable. By the time he returned to Gryffindor Tower, Harry and Hermione were already waiting. Hermione rushed forward. "Where have you been? We were worried." Ron forced a shrug, his voice flat. "Just needed some air." Harry studied him closely, suspicion in his eyes. "Ron, if something's going on, you can tell us. We're your friends." The word stabbed at Ron's chest. Friends. How could they call him that if they never truly saw him? He wanted to shout, to confess, to beg them to understand. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he mumbled, "I'm fine," and pushed past them toward the dormitory. That night, lying awake in the dark, Ron stared at the ceiling. His heart ached with conflict, but the whispers came again, smoother this time, as if they knew his resistance was fading. "They will never love you the way you want them to. They will never see you as more than a shadow. But I will make you great." And for the first time, Ron didn't fight the voice. He closed his eyes and let the darkness wrap around him. The tension in Gryffindor Tower grew heavier with each passing day. Ron moved through the corridors like a ghost, his words clipped, his eyes shadowed. Harry and Hermione exchanged worried looks when they thought he wasn't watching. Once, Hermione tried to corner him after dinner, her hand brushing his sleeve as she said softly, "Ron, please talk to us. We can't help if you shut us out." Ron had pulled back instantly, muttering, "I don't need help." The bitterness in his voice silenced her, and Harry's frown deepened. The truth was, Ron no longer knew what he needed. The guilt gnawed at him endlessly. Every time he looked at Harry's scar or saw Hermione scribbling frantic notes to protect them, his stomach twisted. He told himself he hadn't done much, just a few words, just a hint about Harry's dreams, but deep down he knew. Voldemort didn't need much to turn whispers into destruction. And yet, every time he thought of confessing, another thought came. They would never forgive him. They would never see him the same again. Better to keep walking this path, no matter how dark it grew. One evening, Harry burst into the common room, pale and shaken. Hermione was at his side instantly, her eyes wide with alarm. "Harry, what happened?" "I saw him again," Harry gasped, clutching his scar. "Voldemort. He's furious. He's planning something at the Ministry. It's happening soon." Hermione's face blanched. "Then we need to tell Dumbledore." Harry shook his head. "Dumbledore's gone. He left for some meeting with the Ministry. We'll have to wait." Ron froze, his heart hammering. Voldemort was moving, and Harry had just given him more information than ever. He wanted to scream, to tell Harry to stop trusting him with these secrets, but instead he sat in silence, every muscle tight. That night, he slipped away again. The dungeons were colder than ever, shadows stretching long across the damp stone. Nod and Malfoy were waiting, their faces sharp with expectation. Well, not asked. Ron hesitated, then forced the words out. Harry saw something. Voldemort's planning something at the Ministry. He didn't say when, just that it's soon. Malfoy's smirk widened. Potter's dreams always come true, don't they? The Dark Lord will be pleased. Ron's stomach twisted at the thought of Voldemort's pleasure. He hated himself for speaking, but the words were already out, and there was no pulling them back. Not clapped a hand on his shoulder, his grip firm. You're proving yourself, Weasley. Keep this up, and the Dark Lord will reward you more than you can imagine. Ron pulled away, his voice bitter. I don't care about rewards. Malfoy snorted. Then why are you here? Ron didn't answer. He turned and left, his footsteps echoing hollowly. Back in the common room, Harry was waiting for him. His eyes narrowed the moment Ron stepped through the portrait hole. Where have you been? Ron froze, caught off guard. What do you mean? Harry stood, his voice tense. You've been disappearing a lot lately. Sneaking off. What's going on, Ron? Hermione stood behind him, her eyes filled with worry, not suspicion, but it cut Ron all the same. I needed space, Ron muttered, avoiding their gazes. You two don't need me hanging around all the time. That's not true, Hermione said quickly. Of course we need you. Ron laughed bitterly. Do you? Or do you just need someone to carry your books and trail behind while you two save the world? The words landed like blows. Hermione flinched, hurt flashing across her face. Harry's fists clenched. That's not fair, Ron, Harry snapped. You're our friend. You're part of this, whether you like it or not. Ron's voice dropped, cold and sharp. Maybe I don't want to be part of it anymore. The silence that followed was suffocating. Hermione's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, Harry's jaw tightened, and Ron forced himself to turn away. He climbed the dormitory stairs without another word, but his chest ached as though he had been hexed. In his bed that night, he stared into the darkness. The whispers came again, smooth and relentless. They will never understand you. They will never forgive you. But I will. You are stronger than them, Ronald. With me, you will finally matter. And though guilt gnawed at him, Ron let the whispers lull him into uneasy sleep. Meanwhile, Harry sat by the dying fire downstairs, whispering to Hermione. Something's wrong. He's hiding something from us. Hermione bit her lip, her heart heavy. I know. And if we don't find out soon, I'm afraid we might lose him. Neither of them realized just how true that fear already was. The morning after Ron's bitter outburst, the air in the Gryffindor common room was thick with silence. Harry and Hermione sat at the table, books spread before them, but neither was reading. Hermione tapped her quill against the parchment absently, her gaze drifting toward the boys' staircase. Harry's eyes were fixed on the flames, his jaw tight with frustration. He's not himself, Hermione whispered finally, her voice barely carrying over the crackle of the fire. I've never seen him like this. Harry's scar throbbed faintly, but it wasn't the pain that unsettled him. He's hiding something, he muttered. I can feel it. Every time I ask him where he's been, he has an excuse. He won't look me in the eye. Hermione frowned, worry etched across her face. Do you think he's angry with us? I mean, really angry? Harry shook his head. It's more than anger. It feels like betrayal. The word hung in the air, heavy and terrible. Hermione's lips parted in protest, but she didn't speak. Deep down, she had sensed the same thing. When Ron finally came down the stairs, his hair messy, his robes wrinkled, he didn't greet them. He just grabbed a piece of toast from the table and muttered, "See you in class," before heading out the portrait hole. Hermione turned to Harry, her eyes shining with unease. We can't just ignore this. If something's wrong, we need to find out what. Harry nodded grimly. Then we watch him. Closely. The next few days became a quiet game of cat and mouse. Harry and Hermione kept track of Ron's movements, noting when he disappeared and where he claimed to have been. Ron noticed their eyes on him, the way their conversations fell silent when he entered the room, and it only fueled the bitterness inside him. The whispers in the fire were right. They didn't trust him. One night, long after curfew, Harry and Hermione followed Ron. He slipped quietly out of the common room, his footsteps quick and purposeful. Harry held his breath as he and Hermione trailed behind, ducking into shadows and side corridors. Ron moved deeper into the castle, toward the dungeons. Hermione clutched Harry's sleeve, her eyes wide. "What is he doing down here?" she breathed. Harry didn't answer. He already had a sinking feeling he knew. They reached a corner just in time to see Ron pause near an alcove. From the shadows, two figures emerged, Theodore Nott and Draco Malfoy. Hermione's gasp was muffled by Harry's hand as he pulled her back into the shadows. His chest tightened painfully as he watched Ron stand face to face with their enemies. "Weasley," Malfoy drawled softly. "Right on time." Ron's voice was low, but in the still corridor it carried. "I don't have long. What do you want?" Nott smirked. "The Dark Lord is pleased with what you've given us. But he needs more. What else have Potter and Granger said about the Ministry?" Hermione's hand trembled against Harry's arm, her eyes filling with horror. Harry's blood boiled in his veins, fury rising with each word. Ron hesitated, shifting on his feet. They don't know much. Only that something's happening soon. Harry thinks it's in the Department of Mysteries, but Dumbledore hasn't told him anything more. Nott's eyes gleamed. "That will be enough. For now." Malfoy chuckled. "Imagine that, Weasley, the Dark Lord's little informant. Who would have thought?" Ron's fists clenched, but he didn't deny it. He turned quickly, muttering, "I have to go," and disappeared up the corridor. Harry's vision blurred with rage. He wanted to run after Ron, to grab him, to demand how he could do this. Hermione clutched his arm tightly, whispering desperately, "Harry, wait. Not here. Not now. If they see us." Her words barely reached him, but reason flickered enough for him to stay hidden until Nott and Malfoy melted back into the darkness. When they finally returned to the common room, Harry's hands were still shaking. He paced in front of the fire, his face pale with fury. "He's been feeding them information. Hermione, he's been telling them everything." Hermione sat down heavily, her face stricken. "I can't believe it. Ron. Ron would never." She cut herself off, her voice breaking. "But we just saw him." Harry stopped pacing, his eyes burning. "He's betrayed us. And if we don't do something, it could cost us everything." Hermione buried her face in her hands, her voice muffled but trembling. "What do we do, Harry?" Harry stood rigid, his fists clenched. For the first time in years, the bond between the trio, their unbreakable friendship, was shattered. Ron lay awake in the dormitory that night, unaware that Harry and Hermione knew. His chest ached with guilt, but the whispers soothed him. "They will never forgive you now. You belong to me." And Ron, tears stinging his eyes, didn't know if he could fight it anymore. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, rain streaking down the castle windows as though the storm outside mirrored the storm inside Harry's chest. He and Hermione sat in silence at the Gryffindor table, untouched food on their plates. Ron slid into his usual seat across from them, grabbing eggs and toast like nothing was wrong. He smiled faintly, though his eyes darted quickly away when he met Harry's glare. Hermione reached for her goblet, her fingers trembling. Every instinct told her to blurt out what they had seen, to demand answers, but she caught herself. If Ron had chosen this path, confronting him in the open great hall was dangerous. They needed to be smart. Harry, however, was not interested in patience. His fork clattered against his plate as he leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Where were you last night, Ron?" Ron froze, his hand halfway to his mouth. "What?" he asked, his tone too casual. "You weren't in the dormitory," Harry pressed, his green eyes piercing. "And don't bother lying. I know you were in the dungeons." Hermione's heart stopped, her breath caught in her throat. Ron's face paled, his fork clattering onto the table. For a brief second, the mask of indifference faltered. Then his jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about," Ron said flatly, though his voice wavered. Harry slammed his hand against the table, making several first-years jump. "I saw you. With Malfoy and Nott. Do you think I'm blind?" The great hall had grown quieter, students glancing their way. Hermione reached for Harry's arm, whispering urgently, "Not here." But Harry couldn't stop. His voice trembled with fury. "You're feeding them information, Ron. You're telling them about me, about us. How could you?" Ron shot to his feet, his face red, his voice loud enough to echo across the hall. "You think you're so perfect, don't you, Harry? The chosen one. Everyone follows you around like you're the only one who matters. You and Hermione. You never notice how you leave me behind. I'm sick of it. Gasps rippled through the hall. Even the professors at the head table glanced over. Ron's fists shook at his sides as he glared at Harry, his voice lowering but still sharp. Maybe it's time someone else gave me a chance to matter. Harry's face went white. The implication was clear, and Hermione's stomach dropped. Before Harry could retort, Professor McGonagall's stern voice cut through the silence. Potter. Weasley. My office. Now. Hermione shot up, panic flaring. Professor, please. But McGonagall silenced her with a look, her lips pressed thin. The walk to the office was unbearable. Harry's mind raced with anger and betrayal, while Ron's steps were stiff, every movement a wall against the guilt gnawing at him. Hermione trailed behind, her eyes darting between the two of them, desperate to keep them from shattering completely. Inside McGonagall's office, the door shut with a decisive thud. The professor crossed her arms, her gaze like steel. Explain yourselves. Harry wasted no time. Ron's been sneaking out, meeting with Malfoy and not. He's giving them information, Professor. Hermione flinched at his bluntness, but it was too late. The words were out. McGonagall's eyebrows shot up, her face paling. Her eyes swung to Ron. Is this true, Mr. Weasley? Ron's jaw clenched. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a heartbeat, Hermione thought he might confess. But instead he spat out. No. He's lying. Harry's just paranoid. Harry's fists shook at his sides. Don't lie, Ron. We saw you. Hermione was there too. McGonagall's sharp gaze flicked to Hermione. Miss Granger? Hermione's throat tightened. Her heart hammered painfully. She looked at Ron, his pleading, furious eyes, and then at Harry's betrayed, burning ones. Finally, she whispered, It's true. We saw him. The silence that followed was crushing. McGonagall's expression hardened as she turned back to Ron. Do you understand the seriousness of what they are saying, Mr. Weasley? If what they claim is true, you have not only betrayed your friends, you have endangered the entire school. Ron's face twisted with fury and desperation. You don't get it. None of you get it. I'm tired of being second best, always Harry this, Harry that. Nobody cares about Ron Weasley. But they made me feel like I mattered. Hermione's breath caught, tears stinging her eyes. Harry's heart sank, rage and heartbreak colliding. McGonagall's voice was sharp, but her eyes softened with a trace of sorrow. Ronald Weasley, you will remain under supervision until this is investigated further. I will inform the headmaster immediately. Ron turned on Harry and Hermione, his eyes blazing. You'll regret this, he hissed, before storming out with McGonagall close behind. The office door slammed, leaving Harry and Hermione in stunned silence. Hermione whispered, her voice trembling, We've lost him, Harry. Harry's jaw tightened as he stared at the door Ron had disappeared through. His voice was low, cold. No, he's already gone. The night felt heavier than ever before. Rain still lashed against the castle windows, as if trying to drown out the silence that had settled over Gryffindor Tower. Harry and Hermione sat in the common room, books and parchment scattered in front of them, though neither had the heart to read. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across their faces. Hermione rubbed her temples, exhaustion dragging at her. McGonagall will tell Dumbledore. He'll know what to do. She tried to reassure herself more than Harry, but her voice lacked conviction. Harry stared into the flames, his jaw tight. Dumbledore isn't always there, Hermione. Ron's already chosen his side. What if he's telling Voldemort everything he knows, right now? Hermione flinched at the name, her eyes flicking toward the stairs that led to the boys' dormitory. The thought of Ron, her oldest friend, spilling their secrets to Malfoy and worse, made her stomach twist. We don't know how far it's gone. Maybe there's still a chance to stop this before it's too late. But Harry's expression told her he wasn't convinced. He clenched his fists. He's not just hurting us, Hermione. He's putting everyone in danger. Every student in this castle. Hermione's throat closed up. She wanted to believe that Ron was just angry, confused, lost in the shadow of Harry's fame. But the image of him with Malfoy and not was burned into her mind. His face, twisted with resentment, replayed over and over. Far below, deep in the dungeons, Ron Weasley sat alone in a darkened corridor. His wand rested limply in his hand. He'd been escorted here by Professor Snape, who had been ordered to watch him until further notice. But the moment Snape had been called away, Ron had slipped from the classroom into the quiet, winding passageways. He needed air. He needed clarity. But instead, he found shadows. The flicker of torchlight revealed Draco Malfoy stepping forward, flanked by Theodore Nott. Both wore smug grins. "Well, well," Draco drawled, his voice dripping with triumph. "Looks like the Golden Trio is breaking apart faster than anyone thought. You're all alone, Weasley." Ron's chest tightened. He wanted to snarl at them, to push them away, but the words caught in his throat. His isolation pressed down like a crushing weight. Nott leaned closer, his voice low and persuasive. "You don't have to go back to them, you know. Potter doesn't appreciate you. Granger doesn't see you. But the Dark Lord does. He rewards loyalty." Ron's breath hitched. He thought of Harry accusing him. Hermione confirming it. Both had thrown him to the wolves without hesitation. His fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. Draco smirked. "All you have to do is keep helping us. Tell us what Potter's planning. Where he goes. What Dumbledore tells him. Do that, and you'll finally matter." Ron swallowed hard. His heart screamed against it, betrayal of his friends, his family, but the ache of being unwanted, overshadowed, was louder. For once, someone wanted him. "I'll think about it," Ron muttered, his voice rough. "That's all we ask," Draco replied smoothly, before melting back into the shadows. Ron leaned against the cold stone wall, his stomach churning. The weight of his choices pressed heavily on him, but a darker part of him whispered that maybe it was already too late to turn back. Meanwhile, in Dumbledore's office, Harry and Hermione sat across from the headmaster. Fawkes crooned softly from his perch, a gentle sound in the tense room. Dumbledore's blue eyes, though kind, were grave. "You were right to come forward. Betrayal among friends is one of the hardest truths to face, but also one of the most dangerous if ignored." Harry leaned forward, desperate. "We can't just sit here, Professor. If Ron's working with Malfoy, then Voldemort has a way inside the school. He'll know everything we're doing." Dumbledore steepled his fingers, his gaze unreadable. "That is why we must tread carefully. We cannot accuse Ronald without proof strong enough to withstand scrutiny. The bonds of friendship are fragile, and Voldemort knows how to exploit such fractures. He thrives on turning allies into enemies." Hermione's voice cracked. "But he's already halfway there. We saw it with our own eyes." Dumbledore inclined his head. "And yet, we must not abandon hope. People can make mistakes, even grave ones, and still find their way back. Ronald's soul is still his own." Harry's jaw tightened. "But what if he doesn't want to come back?" Dumbledore's expression saddened. "Then we must prepare ourselves for the possibility that the war will claim not just our enemies, but those we once called friends." The words hung heavy in the air, like a prophecy none of them wanted to hear. That night, as Harry lay awake in the dormitory, the sound of the storm outside still raging, he made a silent vow. If Ron had truly chosen to betray them, Harry would not hesitate. Not this time. He had already lost too much to Voldemort. He would not let Ron's betrayal be the downfall of everyone else. Hermione, unable to sleep, stared out the window in the girls' dormitory. Her heart ached with sorrow, torn between loyalty and truth. She whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible. "Please, Ron, don't do this." But deep below, in the hidden corridors of the castle, Ron Weasley made his decision. He would not turn back. The morning after was eerily calm, as though the storm had drained all sound and fury from the castle. Gryffindor Tower stirred slowly, students yawning and shuffling down to breakfast, unaware of the silent war building just beneath their feet. Harry sat at the Gryffindor table, his plate untouched. Hermione pushed her porridge around with her spoon, equally distracted. Neither spoke, both weighed down by the memory of Dumbledore's words. Across the hall, Ron entered late. His robes hung crookedly, and his eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep. He avoided Harry and Hermione's gaze, choosing instead to sit among a group of younger Gryffindors. They tried to chat with him, but he barely answered, his mind still replaying the whispers of Draco and Nott. Hermione's chest tightened at the sight. "He looks awful," she murmured. Harry's eyes narrowed. "Or guilty." Later that day, the trio found themselves in defense against the dark arts. Professor Lupin, patient and calm as always, had set up a lesson on protective charms. Students paired off to practice shield spells, laughter echoing through the classroom as sparks flew. Harry and Hermione practiced together, their wands moving in sync. But Ron lingered in the back, half-heartedly casting, his eyes flicking toward the door. "Ron," Lupin said gently, "your form is off. Focus your intent. Defense requires clarity of mind." Ron muttered something under his breath and tried again, but the shield sputtered weakly. Draco snickered from across the room. Harry's fists clenched, but Hermione's hand on his arm kept him seated. By the end of the lesson, Harry's suspicions had only grown. Ron had slipped out quickly, before either of them could speak to him. That night, as the castle grew quiet, Ron wandered the corridors, heart pounding. He had agreed to meet not in a forgotten classroom near the dungeons. His footsteps echoed, each one louder than the last, his conscience screaming at him to turn back. When he arrived, Nott was already waiting, a smug grin plastered on his face. "About time. Did you bring anything?" Ron hesitated. His hands trembled as he reached into his robes and pulled out a scrap of parchment. It was covered in Harry's messy handwriting, notes from one of Dumbledore's private lessons. He had swiped it when Harry wasn't looking. Nott's eyes gleamed as he took it. "Perfect. This will do nicely." Ron's stomach churned. "I don't even know if it means anything." "Oh, it will," Nott said smoothly. "You've done well, Weasley. The Dark Lord values information above all. Keep this up, and you'll be rewarded." Ron swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He told himself it wasn't betrayal, not really. Just a scrap of parchment. Nothing life-threatening. Not yet, but he knew deep down that he had crossed a line. Meanwhile, Harry and Hermione sat in the common room, the fire casting flickering light across their faces. Hermione's eyes scanned her book, but she hadn't turned the page in nearly half an hour. Harry stared at the portrait hole, waiting. When Ron finally entered, his face pale and eyes downcast, Harry felt a surge of suspicion. He rose to his feet. "Where have you been?" Ron froze. "What's it to you?" "You've been sneaking off for days," Harry said, voice sharp. "Tell me where you went." Hermione stood too, her tone gentler. "Ron, please. Just talk to us. We want to understand." Ron's hands balled into fists. "Understand what? That I'm sick of being treated like I don't matter? That all anyone cares about is Harry Bloody Potter and his destiny?" His voice cracked, echoing in the common room. "Well, maybe I don't want to be your shadow anymore." Harry's chest tightened with both anger and pain. "So what, you'd rather side with Malfoy? With Voldemort?" The room went deathly silent. Ron's face twisted, guilt flashing across it for a split second before he masked it with rage. "You don't know anything." He stormed up the stairs to the dormitory, leaving Harry and Hermione frozen in the firelight. Hermione's hands shook. "Harry, did you see his face? He's hiding something." Harry's eyes hardened. "Yeah, and I think it's worse than we thought." Upstairs, Ron sat on the edge of his bed, head buried in his hands. The parchment was gone, delivered to Nott. And though no one had yet discovered his betrayal, the weight of it pressed down on him, suffocating. But another thought kept him from breaking completely. Voldemort knew his name now. For the first time in his life, Ron Weasley mattered. Far from the warmth of Hogwarts, deep within the shadows of a cold manor, Voldemort sat surrounded by his Death Eaters. The air was thick with tension, each follower waiting in silence as their master inspected the scrap of parchment Nott had delivered. The firelight glowed dimly across his pale face as his red eyes narrowed on Harry Potter's handwriting. "It is not much," Voldemort hissed softly, "but it is enough to tell me that Potter is being prepared for something." He tapped a skeletal finger against the parchment. "Dumbledore hides knowledge from me, but this proves the boy is not acting blindly." Nott bowed low, carefully measuring his words. "It was provided by a source within Hogwarts. Someone close to Potter himself." Voldemort's lips curled into something resembling a smile. "A traitor, then? How delightful. And who is this source?" Nott hesitated, not daring to say the name aloud until Voldemort's gaze fell upon him like a blade. "Ronald Weasley." A low chuckle rippled through the room, some Death Eaters exchanging amused glances. Bellatrix Lestrange tilted her head, her laughter sharp and mocking. "The blood traitor's son? Betraying his precious friends? How delicious." But Voldemort did not laugh. His expression remained unreadable as he leaned back in his chair, crimson eyes glowing. So, the boy who has always lived in Potter's shadow chooses to step into mine. Interesting. Back at Hogwarts, Harry couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the canopy above his bed, his mind replaying Ron's furious words. Hermione was right. He had seen guilt flicker across Ron's face. Something was wrong. By morning, the tension was unbearable. The trio sat in silence at breakfast, Ron pushing food around on his plate while avoiding their eyes. The rest of the school carried on as usual, oblivious to the invisible wall splitting Gryffindor's golden trio apart. Hermione leaned closer to Harry, whispering, "We can't let this go. If Ron is truly involved with Malfoy, or worse," her words trailed off, too terrible to finish. Harry nodded. "Then we find proof. Tonight." That evening, when Ron slipped out of the common room again, Harry and Hermione followed at a distance, cloaked in the shadows of the corridors. Ron moved with nervous haste, glancing over his shoulder as though he sensed something. He descended into the lower levels of the castle, his footsteps echoing against the damp stone. Hermione's grip on Harry's arm tightened. "He's heading toward the dungeons." Sure enough, Ron stopped at the same disused classroom where Nott had met him before. Harry and Hermione pressed themselves against the wall, close enough to hear muffled voices. Nott was waiting, as always. "You've done well," he said smoothly, his voice carrying through the cracked doorway. "The Dark Lord is pleased. Keep feeding us, and you'll be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams." Harry's blood ran cold. Voldemort. Ron wasn't just sneaking around with Malfoy. He was giving information directly to their greatest enemy. Ron's reply came in a low, shaky voice. "I don't know how much longer I can do this. They're starting to suspect." "Then act natural," Nott said sharply. "Keep pretending. You're closer to Potter than anyone. That makes you valuable." Hermione covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. Harry's heart hammered so violently he thought it might give him away. When Ron left, Harry grabbed Hermione's hand and pulled her back toward the Gryffindor Tower before Ron could see them. They ran in silence until they reached the safety of the empty corridor outside their common room. Hermione leaned against the wall, tears welling in her eyes. "Harry, he really is working with them. With Voldemort." Harry's face was pale but set with determination. "Then we can't trust him anymore. Not with anything." Hermione shook her head, still trembling. "But he's our friend. What if he's just confused or being tricked?" "Confused doesn't make you hand things over to Death Eaters," Harry snapped, his voice sharp with pain. "He made a choice, Hermione." The words cut deep, and silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. Later that night, Ron sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. For a moment, the guilt overwhelmed him. He thought of the years he had spent at Harry's side, of Hermione's endless patience, of laughter shared and battles fought. But then he thought of Voldemort knowing his name, of finally being seen as more than the poor, forgotten Weasley boy. And he told himself again that he had no choice. What he didn't realize was that his betrayal had already been uncovered. Harry and Hermione were no longer wondering. They knew, and now they had to decide what to do about it. Harry barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Ron's voice again, shaky but clear, admitting he had been passing information to the Death Eaters. He turned over in bed again and again, but there was no escaping the truth. Ron Weasley had chosen Voldemort over them. By morning, Harry's exhaustion was hidden behind a mask of cold determination. He found Hermione already awake, sitting in the common room with a book unopened in her lap. She looked up when he entered, her eyes red-rimmed. "We have to talk to him," Hermione whispered, though her voice carried more steel than Harry expected. "If we go to Dumbledore now, without confronting Ron first, it'll be as if we've already given up on him." Harry clenched his fists. "He's already given up on us." Hermione shook her head. "Maybe not completely. You heard him. He's afraid. That means there's still something inside him that knows this is wrong." Harry sat across from her, lowering his voice. "And if we're wrong? What if he's too far gone already? Dumbledore needs to know." "Voldemort knows more than he should, Hermione. Someone has been telling him." "That's Ron." Hermione shut her book with a snap. "If we go to Dumbledore, Ron will never forgive us. But if we face him, and he admits it, then at least," her voice wavered, but she forced herself to continue. At least he'll have the chance to come back. Harry stared at her for a long moment, torn between rage and loyalty. Finally, he nodded once. Fine. But if he doesn't admit it, if he tries to lie his way out, his voice hardened. Then we take it to Dumbledore. That evening, they found Ron sitting at their usual table in the common room, pretending to work on homework. The moment Harry and Hermione approached, Ron looked up, his forced cheer too quick, too bright. Hey, Ron said, his quill tapping nervously against the parchment. You two disappeared last night. Where'd you go? Hermione sat down across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Harry remained standing, his gaze fixed on Ron like a blade. We followed you, Harry said flatly. The color drained from Ron's face. What are you talking about? Hermione leaned forward, her voice low and steady. The dungeons, Ron. The secret meetings. We heard everything. For a moment, silence smothered the common room around them. Ron's mouth opened and closed, his freckles standing stark against his paling skin. Finally, he tried to laugh, but the sound came out strained and hollow. You think I'm meeting Death Eaters? He said, his voice breaking. That's mad. Harry slammed his hands against the table, startling several nearby students. Don't lie to us, Ron. We heard you. We heard you talking to Nott about Voldemort. We know. Ron froze, his face betraying his panic before he could cover it up. He glanced between them, his voice faltering. You don't understand. I didn't have a choice. Hermione's breath caught. Then it's true. Ron shoved back from the table, standing abruptly. His voice rose, trembling with both anger and desperation. What was I supposed to do? Be the third will forever? Watch you two always be the clever ones, the chosen ones, while I'm just Ron? I'm tired of being nobody. The words hit like a curse. Hermione looked stricken, her eyes wide with disbelief. Harry, however, only stared, his expression unreadable. You'd rather be Voldemort's pawn than our friend? Harry asked quietly, his voice cutting deeper than if he'd shouted. Ron's jaw tightened, but his hands were shaking. At least he sees me. At least with him I matter. Hermione stood, her voice fierce through her trembling. You matter to us, Ron. You always have. But you're letting Voldemort use you, and when he's done, he'll throw you away like nothing. Is that what you want? For a heartbeat, Ron faltered. His face twisted with guilt, with fear, with something Harry almost recognized as regret. But then he shook his head stubbornly. You don't understand. Neither of you ever did. Harry took a step closer, his voice ice-cold. Then you've made your choice. Before Ron could reply, the portrait hole creaked open and several Gryffindors filed in, laughing and chattering. The moment was broken, and Ron seized the chance. He grabbed his bag, muttered something inaudible, and stormed past them, disappearing into the crowd. Hermione sank back into her chair, tears threatening again. Harry, we've lost him. But Harry's eyes were hard as steel. Not yet. But if he keeps this up, Voldemort won't just take Ron. He'll use him to destroy us. Neither of them spoke after that. Both knew the truth. Ron's betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was real, and it had just shattered their world. The days following their confrontation with Ron passed in tense silence. Harry and Hermione spoke little of what had happened, but the truth weighed heavy between them. Ron still sat at their table in the Great Hall, still walked with them to classes, but the air around him was colder, brittle, like glass ready to shatter. Every smile he forced looked like a mask, and every laugh sounded hollow. Harry found himself watching Ron constantly, searching for signs of where his true loyalties lay. Hermione did the same, though she tried to disguise it by burying herself in books. Ron, for his part, seemed to notice, and the more they watched, the more he withdrew. One evening, as they walked back from the library, Hermione whispered, He's slipping further away. If we don't act soon, Voldemort will have him completely. Harry clenched his jaw. We act by telling Dumbledore. He needs to know. Hermione shook her head sharply. Not yet. If we tell Dumbledore now, Ron will see it as a betrayal, and then he'll never come back. We have to find a way to reach him first. Harry stopped in his tracks, frustration boiling. Hermione, listen to yourself. He's already talking to Death Eaters. He admitted it. What more proof do you need? Hermione turned to face him, her eyes fierce but filled with pain. Proof isn't enough. He's still our friend, Harry. We can't just throw him away like Voldemort would. If there's even a chance, we have to try. Harry wanted to argue, but the look on her face stopped him. She was clinging to hope, and he couldn't take it away from her, not yet. That night, Ron disappeared again. Harry noticed it first, sitting in the common room while Hermione worked beside him. He glanced around, scanning the faces. Neville, Dean, Seamus, all present. But no Ron. He's gone, Harry muttered. Hermione's head snapped up. Where? Harry grabbed his cloak. Let's find out. They trailed him through the darkened corridors, their footsteps muffled by years of practice sneaking about. Ron moved quickly, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting to be followed. He slipped into the dungeons again, the same path as before. Harry and Hermione crept closer, pressing against the stone wall as Ron whispered a password to a hidden door. It creaked open and he stepped inside. Before the door closed, they heard voices. You've done well, Weasley, a low voice drawled. Harry recognized it immediately, Theodore not. The Dark Lord is pleased with the information you've provided. Keep it coming, and you'll be rewarded. Harry's stomach turned. Hermione gripped his arm so tightly it hurt. Ron's voice came next, shaky but determined. I'll keep helping. Just make sure he knows I'm useful. I'm not just another follower. I want to matter. There was a chilling laugh from within. Oh, you'll matter, Weasley. More than you realize. The door closed, sealing off the voices. Harry's fury burned hot in his chest. He wanted to burst in, to drag Ron out by force, to shout at him until he came to his senses. But Hermione held him back. Not now, she whispered, her voice trembling. We can't let them know we're here. Harry ground his teeth, but he obeyed. Together, they slipped back toward the safety of the common room, their minds heavy with what they had just heard. Later, sitting by the dying embers of the fire, Hermione spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. He's in too deep, Harry. Voldemort is feeding his insecurities, making him believe he'll be important if he betrays us. That's how he works, he preys on the weak spots. Harry stared into the flames, his fists clenched. Then we'll take away Voldemort's hold on him. We'll show Ron the truth. We'll make him see he doesn't need Voldemort. Hermione bit her lip. And if he refuses? Harry turned to her, his eyes hard. Then we stop treating him like a friend and start treating him like an enemy. The words hung in the air like a curse. Hermione shivered, but she didn't argue. Deep down, she knew Harry might be right. Meanwhile, Ron sat alone in his dormitory, staring at the ceiling. His chest ached with guilt, his mind screaming that he'd gone too far. But then he thought of Harry, the chosen one, always in the spotlight, and Hermione, the brilliant one always right. And he thought of himself, always in the shadows. Voldemort's promise echoed in his mind. You will matter. And Ron Weasley, trembling in the dark, whispered to himself, I have to. The morning after their discovery, Harry and Hermione sat in the great hall, their untouched breakfasts growing cold. The chatter around them was loud as always, but for them, every word sounded muffled, distant. Their eyes stayed on Ron, who sat across the table, buttering toast as if nothing in the world was wrong. Look at him, Harry muttered under his breath. After what we heard last night, how can he sit there and act normal? Hermione's hand brushed his arm, quieting him. Because that's what he wants us to believe. He doesn't know we followed him. We have to keep it that way for now. Harry's glare didn't soften. He pushed his plate away and leaned closer. We can't just watch this happen. If Voldemort has already got his hooks in him, it's only a matter of time before Ron does something worse than spying. Hermione's lips pressed into a thin line. I know, but rushing won't help. If we confront him without a plan, he'll run straight to Voldemort. The thought made Harry's stomach churn. He hated the idea of keeping quiet, but Hermione was right. They needed a strategy. Later that day, Hermione dragged Harry to the library, where they claimed a corner far from prying ears. She spread books across the table, parchment ready. Harry frowned. You think we can research our way out of this? Hermione shot him a sharp look. Not research. Preparation. If Ron is slipping into Voldemort's grasp, then we need to know how Voldemort manipulates people. He's done it before. Peter Pettigrew, Barty Crouch Jr., even Ginny in the chamber. There's a pattern, Harry. Harry leaned back, running his fingers through his hair. A pattern that ends with betrayal and death. Yes, Hermione said firmly, but also a pattern we can use to predict his next move. For hours, they pored through accounts of Voldemort's rise, testimonies of those who had been seduced or manipulated by his promises. Again and again, the same themes emerged: power, recognition, freedom from insignificance. Hermione tapped a passage in an old book. Here. It says Voldemort targets those who feel overlooked. He twists that pain into loyalty by offering importance. That's exactly what Ron wants. He wants to matter. Harry's chest tightened. He thought of Ron's voice last night, desperate and shaking, pleading to be more than just another follower. Then Voldemort knows exactly what to say to him, Harry muttered bitterly. Yes, Hermione whispered. But that also means we know what to fight against. We have to show Ron he already matters, without Voldemort. Before Harry could answer, the library doors creaked open. A cold draft swept in, though the air outside was mild. Both Harry and Hermione looked up sharply. Standing in the doorway was Ron, his expression unreadable. Fancy seeing you two here, he said lightly, though his eyes lingered on the spread of books with suspicion. Harry stiffened. Studying, he answered quickly, closing one of the open volumes. Hermione forced a smile. Exams are coming, after all. Ron's gaze flickered between them. For a heartbeat, Harry thought he might press the issue, but then Ron gave a short laugh. Figures. Always one step ahead, aren't you? He shrugged and walked off toward another section of the library. Harry's jaw tightened. He doesn't believe us. Hermione swallowed. He doesn't have to. What matters is that he doesn't know we followed him. That gives us time. But even as she said it, her eyes followed Ron's retreating figure with worry. That night, in the Gryffindor dormitory, Ron lay awake while the others slept. The whispers had returned, not in the castle this time, but in his own mind. A cold voice, slithering like smoke, filled his head. You have done well, Ronald Weasley, it hissed. Ron's breath caught. Who's there? He whispered into the darkness, though no one stirred. You know who I am, the voice replied, smooth and terrible. The Dark Lord watches all who are loyal to him. Ron trembled, pulling the blanket up to his chin. I don't know what else I can do. I've told not things, but Harry and Hermione are suspicious. They're watching me. There was a pause, then a soft, cruel laugh. Of course they are. They will never truly trust you, Ronald. To them, you will always be the sidekick, the shadow, the expendable one. Ron's chest tightened. The words cut deep because they echoed what he already feared. But with me, Voldemort's voice whispered, you will be more. You will be my eyes inside Hogwarts, the one who delivers Potter to me. Imagine their faces when they realize the friend they overlooked is the one who destroys them. Ron squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head. I don't want to hurt them. Lies, Voldemort said sharply, his voice rising like a whip. You already wish them harm. You envy them, the boy who lived, the girl who outshines you. They leave you behind, Ronald, and you know it. Tears burned Ron's eyes. I just want to matter. And you will, Voldemort promised, his tone soft again, almost soothing. Stay close to them. Pretend to be their friend. When the time comes, you will have your chance to prove yourself. You will not be forgotten. You will be remembered. The voice faded, leaving Ron trembling in the dark, his mind a storm of fear and longing. In the girls' dormitory above, Hermione stirred restlessly, haunted by dreams of betrayal and broken trust. And in his own bed, Harry woke with a jolt, the scar on his forehead burning faintly, a warning that Voldemort was near, far nearer than they had thought. The lines were being drawn, even if none of them were ready to admit it. The next few days at Hogwarts passed in a blur of unease. Harry and Hermione tried to act normal, but every word from Ron, every look he gave them, felt sharpened with hidden meaning. It was as if there were two Rons now, the friend they had grown up with, and the shadow lingering just behind his eyes. Harry noticed it first in the smallest things. Ron slipping out of the common room late at night, returning with flimsy excuses. Ron asking oddly specific questions about where Harry kept his Marauder's map, or whether Hermione was working on anything extra clever in the library. Even the way he laughed felt off, forced, hollow, too loud when no one else found the joke funny. Hermione saw it too. She caught Ron once, leaning far too close to a Slytherin during breakfast, whispering something before the boy slipped a folded scrap of parchment into his sleeve. When Ron realized she was watching, He grinned as if nothing had happened, but his hand tightened on his pumpkin juice goblet until the glass nearly cracked. "He's sending messages," Hermione whispered to Harry as they left the hall that morning. "We can't ignore it anymore." Harry's fists clenched at his sides. "Then we stop him." But stopping him wasn't so simple. Ron remained their roommate, their classmate, their supposed best friend. They couldn't just expose him without proof. Dumbledore would ask questions, and Harry knew how easily Ron could spin a lie if it meant protecting his pride. The turning point came during defense against the dark arts. Professor Lupin had returned for a special lecture on defensive enchantments, a lesson Harry had been looking forward to. The classroom was buzzing with excitement, wands at the ready. But halfway through the demonstration, as Harry practiced a shield charm against Neville's jinx, his wand jerked violently in his hand, sending the spell careening into Seamus. A shout went up as desks toppled, sparks flying. "What the?" Harry gasped, staring at his wand. It wasn't his spell, it wasn't even his movement. It was as if someone had tampered with his wand itself. Across the room, Ron was smirking. Hermione noticed instantly. Her eyes darted from Harry's wand to the faint shimmer of magic clinging to Ron's fingers. He had cast something, not obvious, but subtle enough to interfere. Sabotage. She grabbed Harry's arm before he could confront Ron then and there. "Not here," she whispered urgently. "He'll deny it." After class, Harry stormed down the corridor, Hermione at his side. "He's turning on us, Hermione. He's already started." "I know," she said grimly. "He's testing what he can get away with. If Voldemort's voice is in his head, Ron won't even realize how far he's gone." Harry slammed his fist against the wall. "Then we've lost him." Hermione shook her head, eyes fierce. "Not yet. We still have one chance. If we can reach the part of him that still cares, remind him of who he is, we might pull him back. But we'll have to catch him off guard, when Voldemort's hold is weakest." That night, they didn't wait for Ron to sneak away. Instead, Harry pulled out the invisibility cloak, and together he and Hermione followed him as he left the common room past midnight. Ron moved quickly, his steps certain, his face pale in the flickering torchlight. He slipped down staircases and through hidden corridors until he reached an abandoned classroom. Harry and Hermione pressed themselves against the wall as Ron entered. Inside, a figure waited, Theodore Nott. "You've been sloppy," Nott hissed, tossing a folded letter onto the desk. "Potter and Granger are watching you. If the Dark Lord thinks you've been compromised—" "I haven't," Ron snapped, his voice trembling with both fear and defiance. "I've been doing everything he asked. I sabotaged Harry in class. I've passed on what I know. I'm not weak." Hermione's hand flew to her mouth. Hearing Ron boast about betrayal made her stomach twist. Harry's blood boiled, and he had to fight the urge to rip the cloak off and hex him where he stood. Not sneered. "Words mean nothing. The Dark Lord doesn't reward excuses." He leaned closer, voice low and dangerous. "He wants proof of your loyalty. The time is coming when you'll have to show it, by choosing between Potter and your place at his side." Ron swallowed hard. I understand." The silence that followed was suffocating. Harry's scar prickled faintly, and he knew Voldemort's influence was already in the room, unseen but heavy, wrapping tighter around Ron. When Nott left, Ron collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, he looked less like a traitor and more like a terrified boy caught between impossible choices. Hermione's grip on Harry's arm tightened. Her whisper was ragged. "He's not gone yet. Did you see his face? He's fighting it." Harry's jaw clenched. "Then we have to act fast. Because the next time Voldemort asks him to prove himself, it won't be in a classroom. It'll be life or death." And in the shadows of that empty classroom, the fragile thread of Ron's loyalty dangled closer than ever to snapping. The next day dawned gray and heavy, the kind of morning where the castle itself seemed to know something was wrong. Harry and Hermione had hardly slept after trailing Ron to that meeting with Nott. Their whispers in the dormitory had carried on until the fire in the hearth burned down to faint embers, both of them circling the same truth. They were running out of time. At breakfast, Ron sat opposite them as though nothing had changed. He buttered his toast, laughed at something Seamus said, and even joined in when Dean made a joke about Malfoy's slicked-back hair. To anyone else, Ron looked perfectly normal, just another Gryffindor boy starting his day. But Harry noticed how his eyes kept flicking to the doors of the Great Hall, as though expecting someone to arrive. Hermione noticed how his laughter was always a half-second too late. "We need to talk to him," Hermione murmured under her breath, keeping her eyes on her porridge so no one else would notice. Harry didn't reply. He just clenched his fork so tightly his knuckles turned white. They waited until later that evening. The common room had emptied out after curfew, and the crackling fire was their only light. Ron was sprawled in an armchair, staring into the flames, his face caught between exhaustion and something sharper. Harry stepped forward first, planting himself directly in Ron's line of sight. "We know, Ron," he said quietly. Ron blinked, his jaw tightening. "Know what?" Hermione moved to stand beside Harry, her voice gentler. "About not. About the letters. About Voldemort." The color drained from Ron's face. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might deny everything. But then his expression twisted, and anger replaced fear. "You were spying on me. You're giving him information," Harry snapped, unable to hold back. "You sabotaged my spell in class. You've been meeting with Slytherins. What do you call that, Ron?" Ron shot up from his chair, fists clenched. "You think I want this? You think I asked for him to get inside my head? I hear his voice every time I try to sleep, Harry. Every single night. Do you have any idea what that's like?" Hermione flinched at the rawness in his voice. "Then let us help you. You don't have to do what he says." "You don't get it." Ron's voice cracked. "He doesn't give me a choice. If I resist, he'll kill me, or worse. He'll kill my family. Do you think I'm willing to gamble their lives just so you two can look at me like I'm still your precious friend?" Harry stepped closer, his own anger colliding with Ron's. "You are our friend. That's why this matters. Voldemort's using you, Ron. He doesn't care about you or your family. The moment you're no use to him, he'll cast you aside like nothing." For a flicker of a moment, Ron's eyes softened, guilt flashing across his face. But just as quickly, it hardened again. "Easy for you to say. You're Harry Potter, the chosen one. Voldemort wants you dead, not your mom or dad or little sister. You don't know what it feels like to have the Dark Lord looking through your eyes and pointing at your family." Hermione's voice shook but remained steady enough to cut through the rising tension. "Ron, listen to me. He hasn't won yet. If you keep letting him pull the strings, then yes, you'll lose everything. But if you fight, if you let us help you, we can stop him together. Please, don't shut us out." Ron's breathing was ragged. He turned toward the fire again, his shoulders trembling. The silence stretched painfully, broken only by the crackle of flames. Finally, in a low voice, he whispered, "He's testing me. Soon he's going to ask me to prove myself. If I refuse," he trailed off, shaking his head. Hermione's hand hovered in the air, as if she wanted to touch his arm but didn't dare. "Then that's when we stand together. You're not alone in this, Ron. Not unless you choose to be." Harry forced himself to soften his tone. "We've faced him before. We'll face him again. But I can't fight both Voldemort and my best mate. Don't make me." Ron finally looked at them, his blue eyes wet with something that wasn't quite tears but close. He opened his mouth to speak, when suddenly he froze. His entire body went rigid, his gaze unfocused. Harry felt it before he even saw it. The sting in his scar, the pressure in the air, the unmistakable presence of Voldemort's magic creeping into the room. Ron's lips moved, but the voice that came out was not his own. Cold, high, and venomous, it sent shivers down their spines. "So this is where your loyalty lies, Ronald. Whispering your weakness to Potter and the mudblood." "Pathetic." Hermione gasped, backing closer to Harry. Harry's wand was already in his hand, but his heart twisted painfully as he saw Ron's body standing there, shaking under the weight of a voice he couldn't silence. Voldemort was already inside. Harry didn't think. His wand was in his hand, his heart hammering as the voice slithered through the air. Ron's mouth twisted into a cruel smile, though his eyes were wide with terror, silently begging them to understand. Voldemort's voice was calm, deliberate, like poisoned honey. How touching. The famous Harry Potter, pleading for friendship. And the mudblood, always so eager to save everyone. "You think your loyalty means something? Friendship is weakness. Ronald knows this. He knows what it costs to defy me. Get out of him." Harry barked, his grip tightening on his wand. Voldemort's laugh was sharp and cold. "Such anger. You would strike your own friend to hurt me? Fascinating. But Ronald is mine now. He has already proven useful. So much easier to break than you, Potter. Ron's body shook violently, his own voice fighting to break through. Harry, don't listen. But the words were cut short, strangled by Voldemort's control. Hermione raised her wand, her hand trembling. Ron, hold on. We'll drive him out. Harry, we need to use. But Voldemort's voice cut across her. Foolish girl. You think words and spells can banish me? I do not leave until I choose. He turned Ron's head sharply toward Harry. So tell me, Potter, will you duel your best friend, or will you watch him deliver you to me when the time comes? Harry's scar burned, but he refused to look away. Ron's stronger than you think. He's not your puppet. He'll fight you. Voldemort sneered through Ron's lips. He already fights me. That is the delicious part. Every moment he resists. And every moment he fails. He has told me secrets. He has told me fears. And soon, he will bring me what I want most. Hermione stepped forward, her voice fierce despite the tremor in it. No, he won't. Because he still has us. And you'll never understand what that means. For a flicker, Voldemort's control slipped, and Ron's face contorted in pain. Please, make it stop, he gasped before his body convulsed again, the Dark Lord reasserting himself. Harry made a choice. He lowered his wand slightly, his voice steady. You're afraid, Voldemort. The room seemed to tighten at the name, the fire roaring higher in the hearth. Afraid? Voldemort hissed. Yes, Harry said. Afraid that Ron will prove you wrong. Afraid that even when you're inside his head, you can't kill what makes him strong. He's not yours. He never will be. There was a pause, long, heavy, charged with fury. Then Voldemort's voice grew colder. Very well. If he will not prove his loyalty now, he will prove it soon. I will give him a task. A choice. And should he fail, his eyes, Ron's eyes, but glowing with a scarlet tint, fixed on Hermione. I will kill the girl first. Hermione's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. She only lifted her wand higher, her gaze locked on Ron. And then, just like that, the presence vanished. Ron collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, gasping on the rug, his skin clammy with sweat. His face was pale, his lips trembling. Harry dropped to his knees beside him. Ron, can you hear me? Ron groaned, clutching his head. He knows everything. He's going to make me. He broke off, eyes wide with panic. He said he's going to test me. I don't know what he'll ask. I don't know if I can say no. Hermione knelt on the other side, her voice shaking but firm. Then we'll find a way to keep you safe before he tries anything. We won't let him win, Ron. Not through you. But Harry wasn't so sure. Voldemort's words lingered in his mind, heavy and poisonous. A task. A choice. And Hermione's life hanging in the balance. And for the first time, Harry realized that this wasn't just about defeating Voldemort anymore. It was about saving Ron before he was broken completely. Ron barely slept that night. His dreams twisted with fire and shadows, the hiss of Voldemort's voice echoing in every corner of his mind. He tossed in bed, his sheets damp with sweat, his fists clenching at nothing. And then the dream changed. He was standing alone in a dark forest, branches clawing at the sky. Mist curled around his ankles, and the air was thick with silence. A figure emerged from the fog, tall and skeletal, pale skin stretched thin over bone. Voldemort's red eyes glowed like embers. Ronald, the voice whispered, curling like smoke. Your time has come to prove your worth. You want freedom from me? You want me gone from your mind? Then you will serve me. You will obey. Ron tried to speak, but his throat felt locked. Voldemort's thin lips curved into a cruel smile. You will betray Potter and Granger. They still trust you. They cling to their childish loyalty. You will use it against them. And you will bring me what I seek. What do you want? Ron forced out, though his voice cracked. The prophecy, Voldemort hissed. It lies hidden in the Department of Mysteries. Only Potter can retrieve it. You will make sure he does. And when he does, you will deliver it to me. Fail me, and you will watch the mudblood die screaming before your eyes. Ron's knees buckled. No, don't hurt her, please. Then do as I say, Voldemort spat. His voice coiled around Ron's skull like chains tightening. You have one chance. One. Obey, or lose everything you cling to. The forest shattered into darkness, and Ron bolted upright in his bed, gasping, his hands gripping his hair. The scarlet dawn was only just creeping over the windowsill, but his heart hammered as though he had run miles. He could still feel Voldemort's presence coiled around him, suffocating, waiting. He couldn't let Harry or Hermione see the truth, not yet. But the weight of what Voldemort had asked pressed on his chest until he thought it would crush him. Down in the common room later that morning, Harry was already pacing. Hermione sat on the sofa, watching him with furrowed brows. They both looked up when Ron stumbled down the stairs. "You look awful," Hermione said softly. "Another dream?" Ron hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, him again. Just more threats. Same as before." Harry's fists clenched. "He's trying to break you. We need to tell Dumbledore." "No," Ron interrupted sharply, too quickly. "We can't. Not yet." "Why not?" Harry snapped, frustration flaring. "Because," Ron muttered, eyes fixed on the rug, "Dumbledore will see me as a liability. He'll send me away, or worse. I don't want to be locked up while you're out there fighting. I'm not useless." Hermione reached forward, placing a tentative hand on his arm. "Ron, no one thinks you're useless. But this isn't safe. Voldemort is using you, and if we don't do something—" "I can handle it," Ron cut across, though his voice wavered. Hermione pulled back, her expression torn between fear and sympathy. Harry stopped pacing and stared at him hard. "Then prove it," he said. "Stay with us. Fight with us. And don't let him in." Ron swallowed hard, nodding, but inside his stomach turned to ice. He couldn't tell them what Voldemort wanted, not when Hermione's life was on the line. Classes passed in a blur that day. Harry kept glancing at Ron as though expecting him to collapse. Hermione tried to keep conversation steady, but her eyes betrayed her worry. And Ron felt the invisible chain tightening with every passing hour. That night, alone in the dormitory, he whispered into the dark, "I can't do this." But the silence offered no answer. By the end of the week, Harry and Hermione noticed something else. Ron was quieter than usual, distracted, his laughter forced. He flinched at shadows, and sometimes they caught him staring into space, as though he were listening to something only he could hear. One evening, after dinner, Harry pulled Hermione aside in the corridor. "Something's wrong. He's not telling us everything." Hermione bit her lip, glancing toward the great hall where Ron lingered, pushing peas around his plate. "I know. But what do we do? If we push too hard, he'll shut us out. He's already on edge." Harry lowered his voice. "Then we watch him. Closely. If Voldemort's using him for something, we can't afford to let it happen." Neither noticed that just beyond the doors, Ron stood frozen, hearing every word. A cold sweat broke over him. They were right. And if they found out what Voldemort wanted, they'd never forgive him. That night, Voldemort returned in his dreams, colder and sharper. "Time is slipping, Ronald. Do not fail me. Soon, Potter will go to the Department of Mysteries. You will lead him there. And when the prophecy is his, you will take it." Ron's mouth went dry. "And if I don't?" Voldemort leaned closer, his breath icy. "Then Hermione Granger dies by my hand. Slowly. Painfully. Screaming your name." Ron woke with a choked sob. The chain around his heart tightened, and for the first time, he wasn't sure he could resist anymore. The days stretched on with a heavy tension pressing over the trio like storm clouds ready to break. Ron carried the secret like a stone in his chest, and every time he looked at Hermione, the stone grew heavier. He wanted to tell her, Merlin, he wanted to, but Voldemort's hiss lingered in his skull, wrapping around his thoughts like barbed wire. Harry noticed first. Ron's laughter came too late, his jokes too forced, his silences too long. The bond they had built through years of friendship felt frayed, as if someone were tugging at the threads one by one. Harry began watching him as if Ron were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Hermione noticed too, though she tried to excuse it at first. Stress, she told herself. Nightmares. The weight of the war pressing down on all of them. But deep down, she knew there was something darker at play. It came to a head one evening in the library. Harry had left to grab another book, leaving Hermione and Ron alone at the long oak table. Hermione's quill stilled on her parchment, her eyes flicking up to Ron, who hadn't written a single word in half an hour. He was staring into the distance, jaw clenched tight. "Ron," she said softly. His head snapped up, eyes wide, as though she had caught him doing something forbidden. "You've been different lately," she continued carefully. "Quieter. distracted. And don't say it's nothing, I know you. Ron forced a laugh that came out too sharp. Yeah, well, maybe you don't know me as well as you think. The words stung, and Hermione sat back, hurt flashing across her face. That's not fair. Ron rubbed a hand over his face. He hadn't meant it, but the frustration boiled under his skin. I'm just tired, Hermione. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it isn't. He's always there. Always. I can't escape him. Her anger melted at the rawness in his voice. She reached out, her hand hovering above his before resting gently on top of it. You're not alone in this. You don't have to carry it by yourself. For a heartbeat, Ron nearly confessed everything. That Voldemort wanted the prophecy, that he had ordered him to betray them, that every second he stayed silent felt like another nail in his coffin. But Voldemort's hiss echoed in his mind. Tell her, and she dies screaming. Ron jerked his hand back. No, you don't understand. You can't. Hermione flinched, her throat tightening. Then make me understand. But Harry returned at that moment, balancing a stack of books. Ron pushed back his chair abruptly. I need some air. He left before either of them could stop him. Later that night, Ron stood at the top of the astronomy tower, the cold wind biting his skin. He gripped the stone railing so hard his knuckles turned white. He could almost imagine throwing himself over just to be free of it all. You're failing me, Voldemort's voice hissed inside his head, sharper now, more insistent. Do not test my patience. I'm trying, Ron whispered harshly. But they don't trust me anymore. They're watching me. Then earn their trust back. Do whatever it takes. Potter must go to the Department of Mysteries. And you will guide him there. Ron shut his eyes. And if I don't? The image flashed across his mind so vividly he staggered. Hermione, bound and bleeding, her screams echoing, Voldemort's laughter cutting through it all. Obey me, the voice hissed, or lose the one you care for most. Ron's chest tightened. He hated Voldemort. Hated the way he could make him feel like a pawn on a chessboard. But he hated the idea of Hermione suffering even more. By the next morning, he had made a choice. He didn't know if it was betrayal or sacrifice, but he convinced himself it was the only way. If he obeyed, maybe he could keep her safe. So when Harry began ranting about his scar burning again, about visions of Voldemort laughing and Sirius in danger, Ron did the one thing he had sworn he would never do. He didn't argue. He didn't question. He encouraged. Then we have to go, Ron said firmly, his voice steady even as his insides churned. If Sirius is in danger, we can't just sit here. That's what Voldemort wants. He wants us scared. Harry blinked, surprised by Ron's certainty. Hermione frowned, suspicion flickering across her face. Ron, this could be a trap. Then we outsmart him, Ron interrupted, forcing his tone calm. We're not helpless. We've been training for this all year. We can fight. Harry's shoulders squared, determination burning in his eyes. Hermione opened her mouth to argue, but Ron gave her a look so sharp, so desperate, that she swallowed the words. It was working. Voldemort's plan was working through him. But when Hermione's hand brushed against his arm as they left the library, Ron's chest ached with guilt so strong it nearly brought him to his knees. Because he knew. The deeper they walked into Voldemort's game, the closer they came to ruin. And he was the one leading them there. The plan unfurled with frightening ease, as if Voldemort himself had already written the script and they were merely reciting their lines. Harry's visions grew sharper, the image of Sirius trapped and tortured in the Department of Mysteries burrowing into his mind like poison. He paced the common room, fists clenched, while Ron and Hermione tried to reason with him. Hermione pressed hard. Harry, think about it. Why would Voldemort keep Sirius alive? Why the Department of Mysteries, of all places? It doesn't make sense. It feels like a lure. Harry spun on her, eyes blazing. You think I'm imagining it? You think I'd risk Sirius's life on a hunch? Hermione faltered, her lips parting but no sound coming out. Her logic fought against Harry's desperation, and for once it didn't win. Ron stepped forward then, steadying his voice though his insides twisted like rope. She's not saying it's not real, Harry. But if Sirius is in danger, we can't waste time. Hermione, you said it yourself. If it's a trap, we're not helpless. We'll be ready. Hermione's gaze snapped to Ron, suspicion flickering in her eyes. It wasn't like him to dismiss caution so quickly. But Harry's breathing slowed, his fists unclenching, clinging to Ron's words like a lifeline. Ron felt the invisible noose tighten around his neck. Voldemort's satisfaction purred in the back of his mind. By nightfall, the trio stood by the fireplace in the empty common room. Hermione's hands shook as she stuffed her bag with spellbooks and parchment, still muttering under her breath that this was madness. Harry, driven by desperation, clutched his wand like it was the only thing keeping him upright. And Ron carried the weight of two masters, torn between his friends and the dark command festering in his skull. They slipped through the castle under the cover of night. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak of the floorboards too loud. Ron led the way more often than not, taking corridors that avoided teachers, shortcuts Hermione hadn't thought of, paths that Harry assumed came from instinct. But Ron knew. The whispers in his head nudged him forward, guiding him closer to the ministry. At the edge of the castle grounds, Hermione hesitated. "We're really doing this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If we leave now, there's no turning back." Harry turned, determination etched into his face. "Sirius needs us. I won't let him face Voldemort alone." Hermione's eyes flicked to Ron, silently begging him to side with her, to pull Harry back. But Ron only nodded, his jaw set. "Then we go." Her chest tightened. Something was wrong. Something she couldn't name. They reached the thestrals, their skeletal wings stretching wide in the moonlight. Hermione shuddered as she mounted one, still uneasy with the creatures. Harry's face lit with grim focus. And Ron swung onto his thestral with practiced ease, though his heart thundered like a drum. As they rose into the night sky, the castle shrinking behind them, Ron felt Voldemort's presence coil tighter. "Yes, bring him to me. Bring them all." Hours later, the atrium of the ministry loomed before them, eerily silent under the flickering torchlight. Their footsteps echoed as they hurried toward the Department of Mysteries, the sense of being watched crawling over their skin. When the great black doors opened, the silence swallowed them whole. The circular chamber spun as the walls shifted, doors clicking into new places. Hermione's grip on her wand tightened. "This is wrong," she whispered. "It's too easy." Harry, heart racing, pushed forward. "He's here. I can feel it." And Ron followed. Every step down those twisting halls tore at him. Each glance at Hermione's determined face felt like betrayal. Each look from Harry, trusting and unguarded, felt like a knife. And yet he pressed on, because Voldemort demanded it. Because he had convinced himself there was no other way to keep her alive. When they finally entered the vast room of the prophecy shelves, Harry's eyes locked on the glowing orb. His breath caught. "That's it." Hermione stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Harry, wait." But Ron already knew. This was the moment. The snare had tightened. The trap had sprung. The air in the Hall of Prophecies was unnervingly still, as if the shelves themselves were holding their breath. Thousands of glass orbs lined the towering rows, glowing faintly in the dim light. Harry's steps echoed too loudly as he approached the shelf, his eyes fixed on the small orb with his name etched beneath it. Hermione's hand darted out, gripping his arm tightly. "Harry, don't. You don't know what it will do." Harry looked at her, his face pale but resolute. "Sirius is suffering because of me. If this is what Voldemort wants, then maybe it's the only way to stop him." Hermione opened her mouth to argue, but Ron cut her off with a quick shake of his head. His voice was steady, almost too steady. "He's right. We can't leave without it." Hermione turned her sharp eyes on him. "And since when are you so eager to grab the very thing Voldemort wants?" For a heartbeat, Ron faltered. He forced a shrug, the lie burning in his throat. "Because it's obvious, isn't it? If he wants it that badly, then it must matter. And if Harry gets it first, maybe we'll finally have some kind of advantage." Hermione didn't look convinced, but Harry was already reaching for the orb. His fingers brushed the glass, and a sudden pulse of energy surged through the room, humming in the air. He pulled it from the shelf, holding it carefully as though it might shatter at any second. The silence broke. A low, chilling voice rang out behind them. "Well done, Harry. You saved us the trouble." The three of them spun around, wands raised. From the shadows of the room, Death Eaters stepped forward, masks gleaming in the dim light. Lucius Malfoy led them, his wand already aimed. Hermione's stomach dropped. "I knew it," she whispered, her knuckles white around her wand. Harry clutched the prophecy tighter, fury burning in his eyes. Where's Sirius? Lucius chuckled, tilting his head mockingly. Safe for now. But I must thank you for bringing us exactly what we need. Ron swallowed hard. He knew these were the faces Voldemort had shown him in his visions, the allies who would claim the prophecy. His chest constricted as Harry stepped forward, prepared to fight, and Hermione moved to shield him. They were ready to die for each other. And he was here, standing on the wrong side of it all. Lucius sneered. Now be sensible. Hand it over, and no one needs to be hurt. Harry's jaw clenched. I'll never give it to you. The standoff stretched, thick with tension. Hermione's wand never wavered, though her heart hammered. Ron's arm twitched at his side, the dark whisper inside him urging him to move, to disarm Harry, to betray him openly at last. But he froze. He couldn't. Not yet. Lucius's eyes flicked to Ron, and for the briefest moment, recognition gleamed. A subtle nod passed between them, so quick Harry and Hermione missed it, but Ron felt his blood turn to ice. The Death Eaters knew. Voldemort knew. His role was not hidden anymore. The next moment exploded into chaos. Stupefy! Harry roared, his spell flashing crimson. Hermione's hex followed instantly, knocking a masked Death Eater backward into the shelves. Glass orbs crashed to the ground, shattering in brilliant bursts of light and sound. Whispers of ancient prophecies spilled into the air, tangled voices filling the chamber. Ron fired a spell too, his wand blazing, striking a Death Eater squarely in the chest. But his aim faltered with every cast. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to delay, to confuse, to keep the truth buried for one more moment. Spells ricocheted, the room alive with sparks and shattered glass. Harry dodged behind a shelf, clutching the prophecy orb against his chest, his breath ragged. Hermione shielded him, her spells precise, determined. And Ron fought on their side, even as Voldemort's voice pressed against his mind, furious now. Do it. Take it. Give me what is mine. His hands trembled. His loyalty split. Every strike of his wand felt like it would tear him apart. Lucius advanced, his eyes never leaving Harry. You cannot win, boy. You're only delaying the inevitable. Harry glared back, fire in his eyes. I've delayed Voldemort before. I'll do it again. A blast of magic shook the shelves, sending more orbs crashing down. Hermione cried out as she shoved Harry aside, barely dodging a deadly curse. The glow of shattered prophecies painted their faces, fragments of destiny whispering all around them. And Ron knew the truth. This battle was only the beginning. He had led them here. He had delivered them to Voldemort's trap. But he still hadn't chosen whether he would let them die in it. The Hall of Prophecies erupted into a battlefield of sparks and shouts. The Death Eaters advanced like a black tide, spells firing in every direction. The air smelled of smoke and burning dust, the constant crash of shattering orbs echoing like thunder. Harry ducked as a jet of green light seared over his head, clutching the prophecy tighter against his chest. Hermione's shield charm absorbed another blast, but the force of it sent her stumbling backward. Harry, go! She shouted, her voice hoarse but firm. You have to get out of here. Harry shook his head fiercely. Not without you. Ron threw a curse toward the nearest Death Eater, hitting them in the shoulder. The man dropped his wand, giving them a brief reprieve. Sweat dripped down Ron's face, his chest heaving. Voldemort's voice hissed inside his skull, louder than the chaos around him. Seize it. They're distractions. You are mine. Act now. Ron's wand twitched toward Harry, his hand trembling violently. For a split second, his vision blurred. He saw himself stunning Harry, grabbing the orb, running into Lucius's waiting hands. Voldemort's approval burned like a promise at the edge of his mind. Then Hermione screamed. A Death Eater had broken through her shield, his wand raised high. Without thinking, Ron launched himself forward, tackling the masked figure to the ground. His wand pressed to the man's ribs. Stupefy. The Death Eater went limp, his mask clattering against the stone floor. Ron scrambled up, panting. Harry stared at him, stunned. You saved me, Hermione breathed, her eyes wide. Ron opened his mouth, but no words came. He had. Against Voldemort's command, against every dark whisper, he had saved her. His heart thundered in his chest. He didn't know if it was rebellion or weakness. Lucius's voice cut through the chaos. Enough games. Disarm them. The Death Eaters surged forward again, spells exploding against shelves. The floor was littered with shards of broken glass and the fading glow of released prophecies. Hermione grabbed Harry's sleeve, dragging him toward a side aisle. This way. We have to lose them. Ron followed, his wand raised, but his mind was tearing itself apart. Voldemort's rage clawed inside his skull, an invisible scream that nearly made him stagger. Coward. Traitor. Do not forget who you serve. They weaved between the shelves, spells snapping at their heels. Hermione's mind raced. Every turn felt like a dead end, every shelf another trap. Still, she pressed on, her breath ragged. Harry's voice broke over the din. We can't keep running. We have to fight our way out. We're outnumbered. Hermione snapped, spinning to fire a blasting curse that sent 2 Death Eaters sprawling. We'll be killed before we even reach the door. Ron's voice was hoarse. Then what do you suggest? Before she could answer, the ground shook with the force of a powerful spell. The shelves nearest them toppled like dominoes, crashing in a wave of splintering wood and glass. Harry pulled Hermione out of the way just in time, but the passage they'd been running toward was cut off completely. Lucius stepped into view again, wand raised, his Death Eaters closing in around him. His cold smile gleamed beneath his mask. Nowhere left to run. Harry stood tall, prophecy still clutched in his hand. You'll never have it. Lucius's eyes gleamed. You think you can deny the Dark Lord what he desires? Foolish boy. Hand it over, or watch your friends die. Hermione raised her wand higher, her stance unyielding. You'll have to kill us first. Ron's breath caught in his throat. Voldemort's voice purred inside him now, calmer but no less venomous. This is the moment. Take it. Strike now, and all will be yours. Harry shifted, preparing to launch into the fight again. Hermione tightened her grip, ready to protect him. And Ron stood between them, the weight of his choice pressing down harder than the battle itself. One spell, one betrayal, and it would all be over. The question wasn't whether he could do it. It was whether he could live with himself if he did. The standoff in the Hall of Prophecies stretched like a taut string. Harry's wand shook slightly as he pointed it at Lucius, the prophecy orb glowing faintly in his free hand. Hermione's gaze darted between the advancing Death Eaters, calculating their odds. Ron's breath came ragged, his wand raised but his mind a storm of voices. Voldemort's command thrummed inside his skull. Strike now. Take the orb. You will be honored. Do not falter again. Ron's knuckles whitened around his wand. He saw Harry standing there, shoulders squared, ready to die before surrendering. He saw Hermione, face pale but defiant, her eyes full of fire. His stomach twisted. These were his best friends, his family in every way that mattered. And yet, Voldemort's hold on him was growing unbearable. Lucius stepped forward. Hand it over, Potter. There's no point in resisting. Your children. Do not waste your lives on misplaced bravery. Harry's grip tightened on the orb. You'll never get it. Lucius's sneer widened. He raised his wand, and with a barked order, the Death Eaters surged. Spells filled the air in a dazzling storm. Hermione's shield charm flared brilliantly as curses ricocheted around them. Harry ducked low, hurling a stunner that sent 1 Death Eater sprawling into a shelf. Glass shattered everywhere. Ron stood frozen for a heartbeat too long. His wand twitched toward Harry. The urge to curse him was overwhelming, his mind caught between Voldemort's hiss and his own conscience. Sweat poured down his face, his heart hammering so loudly he could barely hear the chaos around him. Hermione noticed. She turned sharply, catching the strange flicker in Ron's expression, the hesitation in his movements. Her eyes narrowed. "Ron, what are you doing?" she shouted over the din. The question broke him. His spell erupted, but instead of aiming at Harry, he spun and fired into the swarm of Death Eaters, the blast knocking 2 off their feet. The effort sent him stumbling forward, nearly colliding with Harry. Harry grabbed his arm. "You all right?" Ron nodded quickly, too quickly. "Fine, just fight." His voice cracked, raw with strain. But Hermione's eyes lingered on him, suspicion blooming. That flicker she had seen, it hadn't been fear. It had been something else. They pressed on, fighting through the chaos. A Death Eater's curse grazed Hermione's shoulder, tearing her sleeve and leaving a bloody mark. She cried out but didn't falter, her wand snapping up to return fire with ferocity. Harry's focus was singular: protect the prophecy, protect Hermione, survive. He didn't notice Ron's growing disorientation, the way his wand hand trembled with every spell, as though he was battling something unseen. Lucius's voice cut through the fight. Take them alive. The Dark Lord wants them breathing. Another volley of spells flew. Hermione ducked behind a fallen shelf, dragging Harry with her. Ron followed, collapsing against the wood. His chest heaved, his eyes wild. Voldemort's voice was screaming now. Traitor! Weakling! I gave you power and you squander it. Do it now, or I will make you beg for death. Ron clutched his head with his free hand, teeth gritted as if he could block out the sound. Hermione's eyes widened as she watched him. She reached out, gripping his wrist. Ron, look at me. Her voice was firm, cutting through the battle. His eyes flicked to hers, pained, almost desperate. You're fighting something, she said quickly, urgently. What is it? Tell me the truth. His lips parted, but no words came. Harry didn't hear. He was peering around the shelf, wand at the ready. Hermione's grip tightened, her gaze searching Ron's face. For the briefest moment, she saw it, the shadow behind his eyes, the pull of something darker. Then a blast shook the shelves, with splintering above them. They were forced to move, scattering into another aisle as curses rained down. But Hermione's suspicion was cemented. Something was wrong with Ron. Terribly wrong. And if she was right, his secret might be more dangerous than the Death Eaters closing in. The air in the Hall of Prophecies grew thicker with every spell cast, the smoke and dust from shattered shelves filling their lungs. Harry led the charge down a narrow corridor, the glowing prophecy orb clutched in his hand. Hermione was right behind him, blasting curses to clear their path. Ron trailed, his steps unsteady, his face pale as Voldemort's whispers twisted inside his head. Hermione's mind whirled as much as the battle around her. She couldn't shake what she had seen in Ron's eyes. His hesitation, the way his wand had shifted toward Harry before he redirected it at the Death Eaters. It hadn't been a mistake. It had been deliberate. But deliberate in what way? Was Ron fighting the enemy in front of them? Or something inside himself? A curse streaked past her ear, narrowly missing. She whipped around and fired a blasting hex that sent the attacker tumbling into a wall of glass spheres. Dozens of prophecies crashed down, shattering into smoke and whispers that hissed across the floor. The voices filled the hall like a haunting chorus, confusing the Death Eaters for a moment. Move! Harry shouted, dragging them forward through the chaos. They ran, weaving through collapsing shelves, but the Death Eaters were relentless. Ron stumbled, grabbing at his temple. His wand slipped in his grip. He could hear Voldemort's voice more clearly than the shouts around him. You are mine, Weasley. Do not resist. Strike now. Kill him. Kill her. You will be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. Ron's vision blurred, his knees nearly buckling. Hermione caught his arm before he fell. She looked at him, her voice sharp even in the chaos. Ron, what's happening to you? You're not all right. You need to tell me. I can fight, he muttered, his words shaking. Just go. But Hermione's eyes narrowed. No, this isn't just fear. Something's wrong with you. Before he could answer, a booming explosion ripped through the corridor. Harry cried out, shielding his face as another shelf collapsed, sending a rain of prophecy orbs shattering all around them. The misty shapes of ancient voices swirled through the air, their whispers echoing across the chamber. In the chaos, Harry shoved the prophecy orb into Hermione's hands. Hold this. Don't drop it. Whatever happens, we can't lose it. Hermione's heart pounded as she tucked the fragile sphere close to her chest. She turned back to Ron, whose face was twisted with pain. He raised his wand sluggishly, firing a weak shield charm as another curse struck near them. Hermione grabbed his chin, forcing him to look at her. Ron, tell me the truth. What is happening to you? For a moment, his mask cracked. His eyes filled with guilt and fear. He's in my head, Hermione, he whispered hoarsely. Voldemort, he talks to me. He wants me to betray you. Every second, he's screaming at me to do it. Hermione's blood ran cold. Her grip on his arm tightened. Since when? Since the department since, Ron faltered, glancing toward Harry. His voice lowered, almost broken. Since before Christmas. I thought I could fight it. I thought I could handle it. Hermione's chest constricted. The betrayal cut deeper than she'd expected. All this time, while she and Harry had trusted Ron, while they had planned and fought together, he had been hiding this. Harry turned, his face flushed with exertion. "What are you two doing? We need to move." But he froze when he saw their expressions. Hermione's eyes wide with dawning horror, Ron's pale face full of shame. "Harry," Hermione said quickly, her voice urgent. "He's been hearing Voldemort." In his head. Harry's grip on his wand tightened. "What?" Ron opened his mouth, but another volley of spells rained down, forcing them to scatter again. The conversation was cut short, but the weight of the revelation hung heavier than any curse. As they regrouped behind another fallen shelf, Harry's green eyes locked onto Ron's with something new distrust. Hermione clutched the prophecy orb tightly, torn between protecting it and protecting the fragile thread that still tied the three of them together. Because now Voldemort's influence wasn't just outside these walls. It was inside their circle. And if Ron faltered again, it could destroy them all. The battle in the Hall of Prophecies intensified until it felt like the entire room was collapsing around them. Spells ripped through the air, shelves buckled under the strain, and the eerie glow of shattered orbs cast ghostly shadows across their faces. The Death Eaters pressed closer, forcing Harry, Hermione, and Ron to retreat deeper into the chaos. Hermione's mind was still reeling from Ron's confession. Every step she took, every glance at him, was laced with dread. She wanted to scream at him for keeping something so dangerous a secret, but there was no time. They were fighting for their lives, and Voldemort's influence was inside their group, waiting for a chance to strike. Harry had said nothing since Hermione revealed Ron's secret. He fired curses with deadly precision, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes dark with suspicion. Ron felt the weight of Harry's gaze even in the chaos. It made his hands shake, his aim falter. He could feel Voldemort's laughter slithering through his mind, mocking him, prodding him to give in. "He doesn't trust you anymore. They both see it. You'll never be one of them. But you could have power. You could be free of them." Stupefied. Harry's voice cut through the storm as another Death Eater crumpled. He turned sharply toward Ron. "Keep it together, Weasley." "I am." Ron snapped back, though his voice cracked. His wand slipped for just a fraction of a second, and in that moment Hermione saw it, the shimmer of red light streaking dangerously close to Harry's side. Her heart stopped. Harry dodged barely, and the spell slammed into the shelves behind him, exploding glass spheres in a thunderous crash. Harry wheeled around, his eyes locking on Ron in disbelief. "Harry, Ron stammered, his face draining of color. It was." Hermione didn't wait. She stepped between them, her wand raised defensively. "Not now. Both of you. We can't do this here." But Harry's chest heaved with fury, his wand still trained on Ron. "That wasn't a mistake, was it?" Ron's lips trembled. His wand lowered slightly, as though weighed down by guilt. It's him. He's pushing me. I can't stop it." The Death Eaters struck again, their curses raining down and shattering more of the chamber. Hermione dragged both boys by the arms and forced them into motion. "If we don't move, we'll all die before we finish this argument." They stumbled into a new corridor of towering shelves, only to find themselves surrounded. Death Eaters closed in from both ends, their masks gleaming in the dim light. Laughter echoed as they tightened the trap. Lucius Malfoy stepped forward, his voice smooth and mocking. "The famous trio. And already fracturing, I see. How charming." His cold eyes shifted to the prophecy orb in Hermione's arms. "Hand it over, and perhaps we'll make this quick." Hermione clutched it tighter, her wand steady. "You'll have to kill me first." "That can be arranged," Malfoy sneered. Before anyone could react, Ron staggered forward. His face was twisted with pain, his hand clutching his temple. Voldemort's voice filled his skull, drowning out everything else. "Take it from her. Now. Kill her if you must. Do it." Ron's wand rose, shaking, uncertain, pointed directly at Hermione. Hermione's breath caught. She stared at him, her own wand frozen in disbelief. Harry immediately moved in front of her, shielding her with his body, his emerald eyes blazing with betrayal. "Ron," Harry said slowly, his voice low and sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare." Ron's arm trembled violently, his wand hand caught between his will and Voldemort's. Sweat poured down his face. He looked like he was being torn in half. "Please," Hermione whispered, her voice breaking through the roar of curses. "Ron, fight it. You're stronger than him. Don't let him win." For a terrible moment, the tension hung like a blade ready to fall. Ron's wand wavered, shifting between Harry, Hermione, and the Death Eaters. His whole body shook with the effort to resist. Then, with a guttural shout, Ron swung his wand away from them and unleashed a blast of raw power into the shelves above. Dozens of prophecies rained down, exploding in showers of mist and light. The Death Eaters staggered back in shock as the storm of voices filled the hall, their whispers deafening. "Run!" Ron roared, his voice desperate, strained. Harry grabbed Hermione's hand and pulled her forward, the three of them sprinting through the chaos. But even as they escaped the trap, Hermione's mind wouldn't let go of what had just happened. Ron hadn't betrayed them fully, not yet. But he had come terrifyingly close. And next time, she feared, he might not be able to stop himself. The Department of Mysteries was unraveling around them. Shattered glass crunched beneath their feet as they ran, the air filled with swirling fragments of broken prophecies, each whispering with long-forgotten voices. Harry led the charge, dragging Hermione's hand, while Ron staggered close behind, his face pale and his movements uneven, as though Voldemort were still clawing at his every thought. "Keep moving," Harry shouted, his voice hoarse. "Don't stop, no matter what." But Hermione's eyes kept flicking back to Ron. His wand hand twitched uncontrollably, his lips moved with words she couldn't hear. The guilt that had crossed his face when he aimed at her was seared into her mind. Every instinct screamed at her to stay close to Harry, but another part of her refused to abandon Ron. The Death Eaters weren't far behind. Their mocking voices echoed down the corridors, spells slamming into walls as they pursued. Lucius Malfoy's laughter carried over the chaos, cold and triumphant. "You can't run forever, Potter." They burst into the circular chamber of black doors, the spinning room whirling before grinding to a halt. Harry grabbed Hermione's arm to steady her, his eyes scanning for an escape. "Which one?" he demanded. Hermione swallowed hard, trying to remember the way. "The one to the left. It should lead back to the main hall." Before they could reach it, the doors slammed shut with a loud, echoing thud. The Death Eaters had sealed them in. "Trapped," Ron muttered under his breath, his eyes unfocused. His voice dropped lower, like he was talking to himself, or to someone else. "He said we'd be trapped. He said this is where it ends." Hermione spun on him, grabbing his shoulders. "Ron, listen to me. That's not you. That's him. You have to fight it." But Ron shoved her away, his strength surprising her. His wand snapped up again, and for one sickening moment, Hermione saw it aimed at her chest. Harry's reaction was instant. His wand was pointed at Ron before he even thought about it. "Drop it. Now!" Ron's eyes widened, filled with torment. His entire body trembled as Voldemort's presence swelled inside him. I don't want to, but he won't stop." The black doors creaked open behind them, revealing Lucius Malfoy and half a dozen Death Eaters, their wands glowing in the darkness. "How touching," Lucius sneered, his voice cold with amusement. "The golden trio, tearing each other apart without us having to lift a finger." Hermione stood rooted between them, her wand raised, torn between Harry's distrustful fury and Ron's collapsing willpower. Her heart raced so violently she thought she might faint. "Harry," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "He's still Ron. He's fighting it. Please don't give up on him." Harry's knuckles whitened around his wand. His voice was sharp, laced with betrayal. "He nearly killed you, Hermione. How am I supposed to trust him?" Ron let out a guttural scream, clutching his head with both hands. His wand clattered to the floor as he dropped to his knees, writhing as though he were being torn apart from the inside. Voldemort's voice whispered through the chamber, not aloud but inside their skulls, insidious and cruel. "He is mine. He will betray you. He already has." The Death Eaters moved forward, but before they could strike, the air split open with fire and light. A voice thundered across the chamber. "Enough!" Albus Dumbledore stepped through the open doorway, his wand raised high. The very air seemed to bend around him, the shadows recoiling at his presence. Behind him spilled members of the Order, Sirius, Lupin, Tonks, Moody, all charging forward, wands blazing. The Death Eaters faltered, their jeers replaced with curses as the battle reignited in earnest. Spells ricocheted off walls, golden light clashing with streaks of sickly green and red. Hermione dropped to Ron's side, gripping his shoulders tightly. "Hold on, Ron, please, just hold on." Harry stood protectively over both of them, firing curse after curse, his eyes never leaving the Death Eaters. Yet his voice cracked when he spoke. "If he turns on us again, Hermione, I won't hesitate." Hermione's stomach twisted at his words. She knew Harry meant it. And the worst part was, she wasn't sure Ron could stop himself the next time Voldemort pushed. In the chaos, Voldemort's voice hissed one last time through Ron's mind. "Soon, you will belong to me, Ronald Weasley. And when you do, they will beg for death at your hand." Ron shuddered violently, his face drenched in sweat. Hermione held him tighter, her heart breaking with fear. The battle had only just begun. But already, the trio's bond was cracked, maybe beyond repair. The Department of Mysteries roared with chaos. Spells cracked against stone, lighting the chamber in violent flashes of red, blue, and green. Dumbledore moved like a storm-given flesh, his wand carving arcs of power through the air as golden fire roared to life, driving back the Death Eaters. Every step he took sent them retreating, yet their resistance was fierce. Harry fought at his side, every curse he cast driven by fury. He had never seen Dumbledore unleash such force. Walls shuddered, the floor cracked, and fire became water with a flick of his wrist. It was awe-inspiring, terrifying, and Harry clung to it like a lifeline. But his heart wasn't steady. Behind him, Hermione knelt beside Ron, who thrashed violently on the cold stone. Voldemort's presence within him pulsed with growing strength, twisting his body as if invisible chains yanked him in every direction. His voice, half his own and half another's, rang out in the midst of the battle. "Kill her! End it now!" Hermione flinched as Ron's hand clawed for his fallen wand. She snatched it first, her grip tight, refusing to give it back. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered desperately into his ear. "You are stronger than him, Ron. You are not his puppet, you're my best friend. Please fight this." His eyes flickered wildly between emerald green and their normal blue, as if two souls warred behind them. Voldemort's laughter hissed through the chamber, not aloud but crawling inside everyone's heads. "He is mine. He chose weakness. And weakness belongs to me." Lucius Malfoy lunged forward, his silver mask glinting as he raised his wand toward Hermione. "Then let the boy finish what the Dark Lord started." Before he could strike, Harry blasted him backward with a shouted curse, rage pouring out of him. "Stay away from her." Lucius slammed against the wall, his wand flying from his grasp. Snarling, he rose again, but Sirius was already upon him, their wands colliding in a violent duel. Sparks showered across the room as Godfather and enemy clashed. Dumbledore's presence commanded the battlefield, yet the true storm arrived when the chamber temperature plummeted. A dreadful silence fell for a heartbeat before a terrible ripple tore through the air. Voldemort himself appeared. The snake-like face emerged from the shadows, pale and terrible, his crimson eyes blazing as he stepped into the hall. The Death Eaters fell back in reverence, their voices hushed. "Dumbledore," Voldemort hissed, his voice chilling and triumphant. "At last!" Dumbledore turned, his expression as calm as still water. "Tom." The air shattered as the two greatest wizards of their age collided. Voldemort's green flames surged forward, met with Dumbledore's tide of water that hissed into steam. Serpents of fire lunged and were turned to smoke, daggers of glass shattered against shields of light. The entire hall trembled with the force of their duel. Harry, Hermione, and Ron were tossed aside like leaves in a storm. Hermione shielded Ron with her body, her wand raised to deflect stray curses, her voice trembling as she called out to Harry. "We have to move him. If Voldemort stays inside him, Ron won't survive this." Harry's face twisted with conflict. His gaze lingered on Ron, on the sweat and pain etched into every line of his face. A war raged inside Harry almost as violently as the one outside. Ron had aimed at Hermione, his Hermione, and Harry's anger hadn't faded. Yet seeing him broken on the floor, suffering under Voldemort's control, burned that anger into something heavier. "Then what do we do?" Harry demanded, ducking under a bolt of silver light that scorched the wall. "Tell me, Hermione, how do we rip Voldemort out of him without killing him too?" Hermione's lips trembled. She didn't know. All she had were theories, desperate fragments of research. But she also knew one thing with certainty. Giving up wasn't an option. She leaned close to Ron's ear, her voice fierce with determination. Listen to me, Ron Weasley. You're stronger than him. He doesn't understand love. He never will. Think of your family. Think of Harry. Think of me. He can't take that from you unless you let him. Ron's fists clenched, his teeth gritted as a raw scream tore out of his throat. His body arched against the stone, his veins bulging as though Voldemort's presence was tearing him apart from the inside. The Battle of Legends raged only feet away, but for Hermione, the true fight was here, on the floor, in the boy she refused to lose. And then, for the briefest flicker, she saw it. Ron's eyes clear, blue, and his own. Hermione, he rasped before collapsing limp against her. Hermione clutched him tighter, her heart hammering. He was still alive. But whether he had won or Voldemort was only hiding, she didn't know. Above them, Dumbledore and Voldemort clashed with earth-shaking fury. The trio's fate, and perhaps the wizarding world's, now hung by the thinnest of threads. The ground cracked as Dumbledore and Voldemort's duel shook the very foundation of the Department of Mysteries. Lightning flashed from Voldemort's wand, crashing into Dumbledore's shield of blinding light. The sound was deafening, like thunder exploding underground. Harry could barely breathe, his eyes darting between the titanic battle and Ron, who lay trembling in Hermione's arms. Every instinct screamed at him to join Dumbledore, but he couldn't leave his friends. Not when Ron's chest rose and fell in shallow, painful gasps. Hermione's hands shook as she brushed sweaty strands of red hair from Ron's face. His skin was pale, clammy, his lips barely moving as if fighting a silent war. She held his hand tightly, whispering into his ear with unrelenting conviction. Stay with me, Ron. You are not his. You never were. He wants to strip everything you love from you, but he can't. Not if you keep fighting. Think of your mum's cooking. Think of the burrow. Think of us. Please come back. For a moment, Ron's face twisted in agony, his jaw clenched as though Voldemort's voice was still hissing commands inside his head. Hermione's tears fell freely now, smudging the dust and ash that clung to her cheeks. Harry knelt on Ron's other side, his wand still gripped tight, his knuckles white. He looked at Ron's tormented expression, and then at Hermione, who was pouring every ounce of her soul into her words. His throat tightened. Ron, Harry said, his voice low but steady. If you can hear me, mate, you've got to fight. Voldemort's strong, but he's not you. He doesn't know what it means to have friends, a family. He'll never understand that. Don't let him win. Ron's body shuddered violently, his fingers twitching as if trying to grab hold of something that wasn't there. His lips moved, barely audible, but Hermione leaned closer and caught the whisper. Hurts too much. Hermione squeezed his hand so hard her knuckles turned white. I don't care how much it hurts, Ron. You're not allowed to give up. Not now, not ever. Her voice cracked, but her eyes blazed with fury and desperation. You hear me? I need you. Harry needs you. Your family needs you. Voldemort can't have you, because you belong with us. For a flicker, Ron's eyes snapped open, blue clear his own. His chest heaved as he choked out a single word. Hermione. Then, with a guttural scream, his back arched and a dark, shadowy mist erupted from his mouth, black and writhing like smoke alive. It hissed and twisted, coiling above them before it shot across the chamber with lightning speed toward Voldemort. The Dark Lord staggered in the midst of his duel with Dumbledore, his crimson eyes flashing as the shadow fused back into him. He snarled in rage, and for the first time his focus faltered. Dumbledore seized the moment. With a single, decisive motion, he unleashed a spell of searing golden light that struck Voldemort squarely in the chest. The Dark Lord shrieked, his body thrown backward into the far wall, the impact sending cracks spiderwebbing across the stone. The Death Eaters cried out in alarm, scrambling toward their master. Harry's heart pounded, the sight almost too unreal to believe. Voldemort struck down, even if only for a moment. But Hermione didn't care about Voldemort. She clutched Ron, who sagged limply in her arms, his chest still rising but weak. Relief poured through her in trembling waves. He had fought back. He had chosen them. Ron, you did it, she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. You're safe now. Harry's hand gripped Ron's shoulder, his voice rough but steady. You're stronger than him, mate. Never forget that. But the moment of fragile hope was shattered when Voldemort rose again. His cloak smoldered, his eyes burned brighter than fire, and his fury radiated like a storm ready to consume everything. "You will all die tonight," Voldemort hissed, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "This ends now." Dumbledore stepped forward, his wand raised, his eyes unwavering. "No, Tom. It has only just begun." The world seemed to hold its breath as the chamber became the stage for a final clash. The chamber quaked with each blast of magic as Dumbledore and Voldemort clashed with elemental fury. Fire roared across the floor, water burst from shattered pipes, and jagged shards of stone ripped through the air. The sight was so overwhelming that Harry could barely comprehend it. It was like watching God's battle. Hermione pulled Ron tighter against her, shielding him as debris rained from the ceiling. He groaned faintly, his breath shallow but steady, and she refused to let him go. Harry crouched beside them, his wand gripped so tightly his fingers ached, his eyes darting between his friends and the duel that could decide everything. Dumbledore moved with a grace that belied his age, his wand arced smooth, his face calm but stern. Each spell was precise, controlled, like a maestro conducting a deadly symphony. Voldemort, on the other hand, unleashed power with unrestrained violence. His fury poured into every curse, his crimson eyes burning with hatred, his voice shrieking incantations that tore through the air like whips. Harry's pulse thundered in his ears. Part of him wanted to run forward, to fight beside Dumbledore, but another part knew the headmaster fought not only to defeat Voldemort, but to buy them time. He realized with a painful clarity that the most important thing he could do right now was protect Hermione and Ron, and get them out alive. "Hermione," Harry shouted over the noise. "We need to move. Now!" Her head snapped toward him, eyes wide, but she hesitated. "I can't just leave Dumbledore. He wants us to get away." Harry insisted, his voice firm. "He's fighting for us. If we stay, Ron won't survive. None of us will." Hermione bit her lip, torn, but when Ron whimpered weakly in her arms, she nodded. Together, they began edging toward the archway that led out of the chamber, ducking as chunks of stone fell and sparks flew past. But Voldemort's voice rang out suddenly, low and venomous, as he turned his gaze toward them even while parrying Dumbledore's spells. "Running away, Harry? Just like your parents tried to run." His laugh was cruel, echoing through the chamber. "They begged me for mercy, and soon you will too." Harry froze mid-step, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Rage flared inside him, and before he could stop himself, he shouted back. "You're lying. My parents died to protect me. They weren't cowards." Voldemort's eyes narrowed, and he flicked his wand. A serpent of flame shot toward Harry, hissing and snapping. Harry raised his wand instinctively. "Protego!" The shield burst into life just in time, but the force of the fiery serpent slammed him backward, sending him crashing into the floor. His chest burned as he gasped for air, the edges of his robes smoldering. Hermione cried out, torn between Harry and Ron, but Harry scrambled up, determination burning through the pain. "You'll never break me," Harry shouted, his wand raised defiantly. "And you'll never break Ron again." At the mention of Ron, Voldemort's smile twisted into something hideous. He pointed his wand at the limp boy in Hermione's arms. "Then watch as I end your traitorous friend." But before the killing curse could leave his lips, Dumbledore struck with blinding speed. A chain of glowing silver light lashed around Voldemort's wrist, forcing his wand arm downward. The curse exploded into the floor, shaking the chamber but sparing Ron. "Do not touch them," Dumbledore's voice thundered, echoing with a power that made even the Death Eaters shrink back. "You will not harm another child while I stand." The duel raged fiercer than ever, spells colliding with concussive force. The ground split open in jagged lines, water pouring into the chamber. The air grew thick with heat and magic, the crackle of power almost suffocating. Harry grabbed Hermione's arm. "Go! Now!" Tears streaked Hermione's face, but she staggered toward the exit, clutching Ron tightly. Harry followed, covering their retreat with defensive spells as rubble crashed around them. Every step was a battle, but they pushed forward, desperate for the safety of the corridor. Just as they reached the archway, a voice rang through the chaos, not Voldemort's, but another's, sharp and cold. "Expelliarmus!" A flash of red light struck Harry's wand, wrenching it from his grasp. His heart lurched as it flew across the chamber, clattering into the shadows. He turned, eyes wide with horror. Standing at the edge of the chamber, wand raised, was Bellatrix Lestrange. Her wild hair framed her manic grin as she cackled. "Did you really think you could leave so easily?" Hermione stiffened, clutching Ron tighter, her eyes blazing. Harry stood in front of them, unarmed, his chest heaving. Behind Bellatrix, other Death Eaters began regrouping, emboldened by her presence. And in the background, Dumbledore and Voldemort's duel reached a crescendo of light and darkness, each trying to overpower the other. Harry's mind raced. They were trapped. Bellatrix's laughter echoed like broken glass across the chamber, grating and wild. She stepped closer, her wand glinting in the erratic flashes of spellfire from the duel behind her. "Poor little Harry Potter," she sang, tilting her head. "All alone without a wand. Just like your dear godfather when I killed him." Harry's blood went cold, fury igniting in his chest like wildfire. He lunged toward her, fists clenched, ready to fight with his bare hands if he had to. But Hermione stepped in front of him, wand raised high, her expression fierce despite the fear burning in her eyes. "You'll have to go through me first," Hermione said, her voice trembling but unyielding. Bellatrix threw her head back and cackled. "Oh, how sweet. The little mudblood thinks she can duel me." Her laughter cut off suddenly as her face twisted into cruelty. "I'll enjoy carving the screams from your throat." Hermione's grip tightened on her wand. Ron stirred faintly in her arms, groaning, and she shifted to shield him even as she aimed at Bellatrix. Harry, though unarmed, moved beside her, his body a barrier between his friends and the Death Eater. Bellatrix slashed her wand. "Crucio!" Hermione spun sideways, barely deflecting it. The curse slammed into the stone wall, sending shards flying. Harry grabbed Ron, pulling him back as Hermione unleashed her own spell. "Stupefy!" Bellatrix blocked it lazily, laughing again. "Pathetic. Is that all you've learned, little schoolgirl?" She twirled her wand mockingly before firing another curse, green light streaking past Hermione's cheek so close it singed her hair. Hermione's breath caught, but she didn't falter. Her voice shook but carried power. "Petrificus totalis." Bellatrix ducked and flicked her wand. A column of flame erupted between them, heat washing over Harry's face. He coughed, dragging Ron further away from the fire. The smoke thickened, making it hard to see. Through the haze, Harry saw Hermione's eyes, focused, determined, refusing to give Bellatrix the satisfaction of breaking her. She shifted her stance, wand steady. Harry's voice cracked as he shouted, "Hermione, look out!" But instead of dodging, Hermione raised her wand with both hands and screamed, "Expulso!" The force of the blast rocked the chamber, slamming into the ground at Bellatrix's feet. The explosion sent the Death Eater tumbling backward, her manic laughter replaced by a shriek of fury. Dust and rock filled the air as the floor cracked beneath them. Harry seized the moment. He scooped up a loose chunk of stone and hurled it at Bellatrix with all his strength. It struck her shoulder, making her stumble and snarl in rage. "You filthy little brat," she screeched, eyes wild. "I'll gut you for that." But before she could raise her wand again, Hermione shouted another spell. Impedimenta. The curse struck Bellatrix squarely in the chest, freezing her mid-step as though she had been caught in invisible tar. Her arms flailed, her expression twisted with rage, but her movements slowed to a crawl. "Harry, grab your wand," Hermione shouted. Harry's eyes darted across the rubble-strewn floor until he spotted his wand glinting beneath a shattered statue. He sprinted toward it, diving just as Bellatrix managed to break free of Hermione's curse. Her wand swung toward him, lips parting to unleash another spell. But Hermione was faster. Expelliarmus. Bellatrix's wand flew from her hand, spinning through the air and clattering across the chamber. For the first time, Bellatrix's face twisted in shock, her laughter silenced. Harry's fingers closed around his wand at the same moment, and he leapt to his feet, pointing it straight at her. His chest heaved with fury and fear, the image of Sirius falling through the veil flashing before his eyes. But before either he or Hermione could strike, another deafening crack split the chamber. The duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort had erupted into a blinding explosion of light and darkness, knocking everyone off their feet. The ground trembled and water surged through the fissures, flooding the floor. Bellatrix scrambled back toward the shadows, her wild grin returning as she vanished into the chaos, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Next time, little Potter. Next time I'll finish what I started." Harry staggered back to Hermione, who was clutching Ron with shaking arms. She was pale, sweat dripping down her face, but her eyes still burned with defiance. "You did it," Harry said, breathless. "You held her off." Hermione gave a weak, determined smile. "We're not done yet. But we're not giving up either." Behind them, Voldemort's roar of rage shook the chamber as he battled Dumbledore with even greater fury. The fight for survival was far from over. The chamber quaked as Dumbledore and Voldemort's duel raged at the center, light and shadow colliding with earth-shattering force. Streams of water poured from the cracked floor, rising around Harry's ankles as he clutched his wand, shielding Hermione and Ron. The roaring clash of spells drowned out even Bellatrix's retreating laughter, leaving only the thunder of magic that threatened to tear the place apart. Voldemort's eyes glowed red through the smoke, his pale face twisted with fury. With a flick of his wand, a serpent of fire erupted, hissing and coiling toward Dumbledore. But Dumbledore, calm even amid the chaos, raised his own wand in a graceful arc. The fiery serpent froze, twisted, and transformed into a massive wave of water that crashed down, dousing the chamber in steam. Harry blinked against the burning mist, heart hammering. It felt impossible that anyone could face Voldemort and still stand. But Dumbledore moved as though he had been preparing for this moment all his life. "You cannot win, Tom," Dumbledore's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "Your hunger for power blinds you to the strength that truly matters." "Do not call me that." Voldemort's scream reverberated, shaking the very walls. He slashed his wand, sending a jagged bolt of green light hurtling across the chamber. Harry froze, breath caught, but Dumbledore spun his wand, conjuring a shield of pure white light. The killing curse struck it and dissolved into sparks that fizzled in the rising flood. Hermione gripped Harry's arm, whispering urgently, "We need to move. If this chamber collapses." But Harry couldn't tear his eyes away. His entire body screamed to stay, to watch, to see Dumbledore prove that Voldemort wasn't invincible. Voldemort's fury built like a storm. He unleashed spell after spell, sheets of fire, shards of ice, curses that twisted the air itself. But each time, Dumbledore countered, weaving defenses of water, light, and stone. His robes billowed as if caught in a wind only he could control, his expression grim but unshaken. For one dizzying moment, Harry thought Dumbledore was winning. Voldemort staggered as the floor beneath him cracked open, swallowing his footing. A whip of water lashed across his arm, knocking his wand from its rigid grip. Gasps echoed in Harry's throat as the Dark Lord faltered. Hermione clutched Ron tighter, her lips parting in astonishment. He's disarmed him. But Voldemort's scream split the chamber, raw and unnatural. With a surge of willpower, he extended his long, skeletal fingers. The wand leapt back into his grasp, as if refusing to obey anyone else. His pale face twisted into rage and desperation. "You cannot defeat me," Voldemort roared, voice echoing like thunder. "I am forever." Dumbledore's eyes burned with a fierce light. He raised his wand, power radiating from him in waves. "Nothing is forever, Tom. Not even you." A shockwave of magic erupted between them, so bright that Harry threw his arms across his face. The water surged higher, swirling like a whirlpool around the chamber's broken floor. Stone shattered, debris rained down, and the veil of the Department of Mysteries shuddered on its arch as though resonating with the battle. Harry's ears rang. When he dared to look again, Voldemort was staggering, his robes torn, his breath ragged. For the first time, Harry saw something in those crimson eyes that looked almost like fear. Hermione tugged at Harry's sleeve, shouting above the roar. "Harry, we have to go. Now!" Harry hesitated, torn between his desperate need to stay and the knowledge that Hermione was right. The chamber was falling apart. Ron was barely conscious. If they didn't move, none of them would escape alive. As Dumbledore and Voldemort clashed once more, light exploding brighter than lightning, Harry made his choice. He nodded grimly, wrapping Ron's arm over his shoulder. Hermione steadied him on the other side, her face pale but determined. Together, they splashed through the rising water, heading for the exit as the duel behind them reached its breaking point. Voldemort's scream of rage followed them through the chaos. And Dumbledore's voice, calm and resolute, answered it with a final surge of power. The ministry corridors were in disarray, alarms blaring through the endless halls as Harry, Hermione, and Ron stumbled forward. Water and smoke clung to them, their robes heavy and soaked. Ron groaned with each step, his weight dragging heavily on Harry's shoulder, but Harry refused to let him falter. Hermione's grip was firm, her wand clutched in her other hand, eyes darting around every corner for signs of danger. The echoes of Dumbledore and Voldemort's duel still thundered behind them, rumbling through the stone like distant earthquakes. Every crash made Harry's chest tighten. He wanted to turn back. Every step away from the battle felt wrong, like betrayal, but the sound of Ron's ragged breathing kept him pressing forward. The trio reached the lift at last, but the golden grills were twisted and half destroyed, sparks flickering along the cables. Hermione bit her lip, panic flashing in her eyes. "We can't use this, it'll collapse." "Then where?" Harry demanded, his voice hoarse. His throat still ached from smoke and the searing energy that had filled the chamber. Hermione raised her wand, pointing to a stairwell leading upward. "That way. We need to reach the atrium." They half-dragged, half-carried Ron up the stairs, their breaths harsh and uneven. Around them, ministry workers were fleeing in confusion. Some wore the dark robes of unspeakables, faces pale and fearful. Others clutched briefcases, as though still trying to protect their work. A few froze at the sight of Harry, whispering his name in shock, but none stopped to help. The air grew clearer as they climbed, though the ground still trembled. At last they burst into the atrium, and Harry nearly collapsed at the sight. The grand hall was in chaos. The golden fountain lay shattered, its statues of magical creatures scattered in pieces across the floor. Fires burned in corners where spells had ricocheted. Ministry wizards ran frantically, some shouting orders, others dueling cloaked Death Eaters who had forced their way in. The green flames of the Flu network flickered erratically, surging like storms as magic overloaded the system. Hermione froze in horror. "They're everywhere." Indeed, Death Eaters poured through the atrium's corridors, dueling anyone in their path. Masked figures stalked through the smoke, casting curses that sent ministry wizards scrambling for cover. The war wasn't just in the Department of Mysteries anymore. It had erupted into the very heart of the wizarding world. Harry's chest clenched. He wanted to scream, to demand where Dumbledore was, if he was still alive, if he had managed to stop Voldemort. But before he could speak, a cold, mocking laugh rang out from across the hall. Lucius Malfoy stepped through the chaos, his silver mask gleaming in the firelight. He moved with chilling calm, as though the destruction were nothing more than an evening stroll. His wand was already raised, his eyes fixed on Harry. "Well," Lucius drawled, his voice cutting through the noise. "The boy who lived, dragging along his broken friends. How touching." Harry tightened his grip on Ron, his anger flaring. He shoved Ron into Hermione's arms and stepped forward, raising his wand. "Stay back," he warned, voice shaking but firm. Lucius tilted his head, almost amused. "You can't possibly think you'll stand against us. Not now. Not without Dumbledore to protect you." Harry's heart lurched. The words stabbed deep, confirmation of the fear gnawing at him. Did Lucius know something? Had Dumbledore fallen? He pushed the thought aside, refusing to let it paralyze him. Hermione stepped to Harry's side, her eyes blazing. "You'll have to go through both of us." For the first time, Lucius sneered, lowering his wand slightly as if considering their defiance. Foolish children. Before he could strike, a bolt of purple light streaked across the atrium, narrowly missing him and blasting a hole in the floor at his feet. He snarled and spun around. "Stand down, Malfoy," shouted Kingsley Shacklebolt, striding through the smoke with his wand ready. Behind him came Tonks, her hair a fiery pink despite the dust coating her face. Members of the Order were arriving, their presence a beacon amid the chaos. Relief crashed over Harry, but it was fleeting. The battle in the atrium was only growing, the clash of spells lighting up the grand hall like a storm of fireworks. As Kingsley and Lucius exchanged deadly curses, Hermione tugged Harry back. "We need to get Ron out of here. He won't last much longer if we don't." Harry nodded, torn between his urge to fight and his need to protect his friends. Together, they pulled Ron toward the edge of the atrium, aiming for the fireplaces. The green flames roared, unstable but still functioning. But before they reached them, Harry felt it. The cold. The silence. The shift in the air that made his skin crawl. Every duel paused. Every voice fell silent. A figure emerged from the smoke at the far end of the atrium, his eyes glowing like embers. Voldemort. He was not unscathed. His robes were scorched, his skin marked with faint burns, but he stood tall, his rage radiating like heat. His wand gleamed in his pale hand. Harry's heart slammed against his ribs. If Voldemort was here, then Dumbledore. Hermione's gasp told him she was thinking the same thing. The atrium, already silent, seemed to hold its breath as Voldemort raised his wand. And the battle began again. The silence shattered like glass as Voldemort raised his wand, and the atrium erupted into chaos. Order members hurled themselves into the fray, their spells streaking through the smoke and fire, but Voldemort moved like a shadow, his magic tearing through every defense. Green and red flashes illuminated the golden wreckage of the fountain, casting monstrous shadows across the walls. Harry's breath caught. The sheer force of Voldemort's presence pressed against him, suffocating, pulling at every dark corner of his mind. He could feel the connection tugging at his scar, could feel the whispers trying to claw into him, to bend him to the Dark Lord's will. His knees wavered, but Hermione's hand gripped his arm fiercely, anchoring him. "Stay with me, Harry," she hissed, her voice shaking but steady with determination. Across the hall, Lucius Malfoy retreated toward Voldemort, his mask cracked, fury twisting his face. Kingsley pressed forward, his booming voice echoing spells that rattled the walls. Tonks darted through the fight with wild agility, dueling two Death Eaters at once. Sparks flew as wands clashed, but all eyes kept flicking back to Voldemort. "Harry Potter," Voldemort hissed, his voice slicing through the air. "Always running, always hiding behind others. Do you think these pitiful fools can protect you?" Harry's chest burned. He forced himself forward, stepping in front of Hermione, though every instinct screamed to stay hidden. "I'm not hiding," he shot back, his voice raw. "I'll never hide from you." Voldemort's eyes gleamed like a serpent's. "Then come, boy. Let us end this farce." Hermione pulled at Harry's arm, panic flaring in her eyes. "Harry, no. You can't." But Voldemort had already raised his wand. The killing curse streaked across the atrium, green fire slicing the air. Harry dove aside, dragging Hermione with him, the spell blasting apart the wall behind them. Debris rained down, the floor trembling beneath their feet. Order members surged to intercept. Kingsley struck Voldemort with a beam of blue light so powerful it cracked the marble beneath his feet, but Voldemort barely staggered, his fury only deepening. With a sweep of his wand, he sent a shockwave tearing through the hall, throwing witches and wizards alike across the floor. Tonks slammed into a column, coughing blood. "Enough!" Voldemort roared, his voice amplified with magic, rattling the glass ceiling overhead. "This night marks the fall of your precious world. Dumbledore is gone. None of you can stop me." Harry's stomach lurched. Dumbledore gone? He couldn't let himself believe it, yet Voldemort's words cut like blades. His scar seared, filling his mind with flashes of fire, shadow, and Dumbledore's voice shouting spells he couldn't hear. Hermione squeezed his arm, her eyes wild. "Harry, we have to move. If he focuses on you, we're done." But Harry couldn't move. His anger, his grief, his fear, they all swelled inside him until he felt ready to explode. And then, just as Voldemort's wand swung toward him again, a new voice rang out across the atrium. "You are wrong, Tom." The air shifted. Time itself seemed to pause. From the smoke at the opposite end of the hall, Dumbledore emerged, his robes torn, his hair singed, but his eyes blazing with light that pierced through every shadow. The staff in his hand glowed faintly, alive with raw power. Relief crashed over Harry so suddenly his knees nearly buckled. Hermione gasped aloud, her grip tightening. Order members, bruised and battered, lifted their heads in disbelief. Voldemort froze, his expression twisting into something between fury and hatred. "You should be ashes," he hissed. "Perhaps," Dumbledore said calmly, his voice carrying like thunder. "But it seems fate is not on your side this evening." The two men raised their wands in unison. And then the atrium was no longer a battlefield but a storm. Fire and water clashed in midair. Stone cracked and shuddered. The very air trembled under the weight of their spells. Dumbledore conjured a ring of golden light that absorbed a volley of curses, shattering like glass as Voldemort's magic pressed harder. Voldemort sent serpents of flame spiraling across the hall, but Dumbledore's countercharm twisted them into harmless doves that burst into sparks. Harry and Hermione shielded Ron as best they could, dragging him behind what little cover remained. The force of the duel was unbearable, each spell like a thunderclap. And then Harry felt it again, the connection. His scar blazed, his mind filled with Voldemort's rage and fear. He gasped, clutching his head as the world around him seemed to waver. He could see through Voldemort's eyes, could feel the fury and the doubt. For a flicker of a moment, he saw what Voldemort feared most, not Dumbledore, but something else. Something within Harry himself. Hermione pulled him back to reality, shaking him fiercely. "Harry, don't let him in." Through the storm of spells, Harry forced himself to focus. Voldemort and Dumbledore were locked in a battle of power unlike anything he had ever seen. But somehow, he knew he was not just a bystander anymore. The connection between him and Voldemort was not a weakness. It was the key, and if he didn't use it, Dumbledore might not win. The atrium shook as if the building itself were alive, groaning under the strain of the battle between Dumbledore and Voldemort. Spells ripped through the air with blinding force, their collision throwing off showers of sparks that burned holes into the marble floor. Harry's scar seared with unbearable pain, every wave of Voldemort's magic pressing against his mind like molten iron. Hermione crouched beside him, her face pale, trying to shield Ron from falling rubble. "Harry, stay with me. Don't let him in," she begged, clutching his arm. But Harry realized something. Voldemort wasn't just forcing his way into his mind. He was bleeding into it, leaving parts of himself exposed. Harry could see him, see his rage, his desperation, his fear. It wasn't just power Voldemort was unleashing. It was weakness too. Harry gritted his teeth, sweat running down his temple. "No, Hermione. I think I can use this." Hermione's eyes widened in horror. "Harry, no. If you let him in, he'll destroy you." But Harry shook his head. "Or I destroy him." Before Hermione could stop him, Harry closed his eyes and let the connection deepen. The scar burned hotter, his body trembling as his mind plunged into the storm of Voldemort's thoughts. For a heartbeat, he wasn't Harry Potter anymore. He was inside Voldemort, standing in the hollow abyss of his soul. He saw flashes, graveyards, serpents, a young boy crying in a dark orphanage room, the image of Dumbledore in fire, and most of all, a reflection Voldemort loathed to face. Harry himself. Back in the atrium, Voldemort faltered mid-spell. His hand shook, his curse spiraling wide, striking a column instead of Dumbledore. His red eyes flickered as if he'd felt something crawl into his chest. Dumbledore seized the moment. A whip of water lashed forward, knocking Voldemort back, crashing him into the wreckage of the fountain. The Dark Lord roared, fury spilling from him in waves, but his confidence had cracked, if only for an instant. Inside his mind, Harry pressed harder. He threw his feelings at Voldemort, everything he had kept locked inside for years. He pushed out his love for Hermione, the loyalty of Ron, the warmth of the burrow, the memory of Sirius laughing, even the image of his parents smiling in the mirror of Erist. Voldemort screamed, the sound tearing through the atrium, as if he were being burned alive. He clutched his head, stumbling, his wand arm faltering. The air trembled with the force of his rage and pain. "Harry, stop!" Hermione cried, watching him writhe on the floor, his scar glowing like fire. She grabbed his shoulders, trying to pull him back, terrified that Voldemort might drag Harry's soul down with him. But Harry held on. For the first time in his life, he felt stronger than Voldemort. Not because of power, but because of what Voldemort could never have. And Voldemort knew it. "Love," Harry whispered through clenched teeth, his voice echoing strangely as though it reached both worlds. "That's what you'll never have. That's why you'll never win." Voldemort shrieked, his body twisting violently, his face contorting with fury and terror. The magic around him spiraled out of control, cracks splitting the atrium floor as shadows surged and broke apart like shattered glass. Dumbledore raised his wand high, his voice booming with a final incantation. Golden light erupted, swallowing Voldemort in a sphere that pulsed with unbearable brilliance. For a moment, the entire atrium seemed to collapse into silence. And then, with a thunderous crack, Voldemort was gone. Only a ripple of cold air remained, the mark of his departure. Harry collapsed to the floor, gasping, his scar still smoldering with pain. Hermione was instantly at his side, holding his face in her hands, tears streaking her cheeks. "Harry, are you with me? Please say something." Harry blinked, disoriented, then managed a weak, exhausted smile. I'm here." "He's gone." Around them, Order members staggered to their feet, battered but alive. Kingsley helped Tonks to stand. Moody spat curses at the wreckage, and Ron, pale and shaky, leaned on Hermione with what little strength he had left. Dumbledore lowered his wand, his expression grave. His robes were scorched, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes still burned with fierce determination. "He has fled for now," he said heavily. "But he will return. Stronger. And next time he will not be so careless." The Ministry officials who had hidden now emerged, their faces pale with terror at what they had witnessed. Cornelius Fudge stumbled forward, his hands trembling, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He had seen it all. There was no denying it anymore. Voldemort was back. And the world had just changed forever. The wreckage of the atrium still smoldered when silence finally settled. Cracks spiderwebbed through the marble floor. Pieces of the once grand fountain lay shattered in glittering heaps, and the golden statues that had once stood tall were nothing but twisted remnants. The Ministry of Magic, a place that had always seemed untouchable, now looked as though a war had torn through its very heart. Cornelius Fudge stood frozen, his bowler hat askew, his face drained of all color. He had seen Voldemort with his own eyes, had heard the chilling voice that no wizard could mistake. His lips moved soundlessly, muttering half-formed protests, as though denial could still cling to him. Dumbledore turned to him, his expression calm but steely. "You have your proof, Cornelius. He has returned. And the longer you spend refusing to act, the more lives will be lost." Fudge's mouth opened and closed. "But it's impossible. We would have known. There would have been signs." His voice cracked, shaking under the weight of the truth. "He can't be back. Not like this." Harry, still on the floor, struggled to push himself upright. His whole body ached, and his scar burned like a fresh wound. Hermione supported him instantly, her arm around his shoulders, her hand pressed against his chest as if to ground him. Ron limped forward, wincing with every step, but determined not to let Harry or Hermione face the chaos alone. "Believe it," Harry croaked, his voice raw but steady. His green eyes, still glowing faintly from the mental battle, locked onto Fudge. "He's back. And if you keep pretending he isn't, then you're helping him." The atrium fell deathly silent at Harry's words. The young wizard who had so long been called a liar, a troublemaker, was now the only one standing firm. Fudge's gaze darted desperately around the wreckage, as though searching for escape. His trembling hands wrung together, his eyes flicking from the Order members to the terrified Aurors who had survived. The truth weighed on him, crushing the denial he had built for so long. Amelia Bones, who had arrived late to the chaos, stepped forward. Her cloak was scorched, but her posture was unyielding. "Minister, we all saw it. There is no running from this. The Dark Lord has returned." Kingsley Shacklebolt added firmly, "You must act, Minister. Now, or you will lose control of everything." Fudge's face twitched, his pride warring with fear. He opened his mouth to argue, but Dumbledore raised a hand, silencing the chamber. "Cornelius," Dumbledore said, his voice low but commanding, "the world is watching. History will remember what you do next. Either you lead us against Voldemort, or you condemn our world to fall under him." The name sent a ripple through the Ministry officials, several flinching at the sound of it. Fudge's breath came in ragged gasps. For a moment, it seemed he might crumble entirely. Then, straightening slightly, he croaked, "Summon the prophet. We will make an announcement. The public must be told the truth." The words, though reluctant, shifted the air. The lie had shattered. Hermione tightened her grip on Harry's arm, whispering in his ear, "It's over for now. You did it." Her eyes, though wet with tears, gleamed with pride. Harry shook his head faintly. "No, it's just beginning." Dumbledore's gaze swept across the wreckage, lingering on Harry for a moment longer than the rest. His face softened with sorrow. "Indeed, Harry. And now the real war begins." Later, as the Ministry slowly began clearing the debris, Dumbledore gathered Harry, Hermione, and Ron near the fireplaces. The Order members lingered close, their faces set with grim determination. "You three have shown more courage tonight than most wizards twice your age," Dumbledore said quietly. "But courage will not shield you from what is to come. The choices ahead will be heavier than any you have yet faced." Harry nodded wearily. His body screamed for rest, but his mind was wide awake, still echoing with Voldemort's presence. Hermione squeezed his hand gently, as though trying to anchor him, while Ron, limping and pale, stood stubbornly upright beside them. "Sir," Harry asked suddenly, his voice rough, "when I connected with him, I felt him break. Just for a moment. Like he was afraid." He looked up at Dumbledore, searching for answers. "What does that mean?" Dumbledore's eyes, full of their usual depth, darkened with gravity. "It means, Harry, that even Voldemort has a weakness. And you may be the only one who can reach it." Hermione's breath caught, and Ron frowned, his expression tight. But before they could question further, the fireplaces flared, and ministry workers began rushing in and out, the frantic storm of politics already beginning. The war was no longer in whispers. It was here, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Daily Prophet headline the next morning blared across every table in the wizarding world. "He who must not be named returns, ministry confirms." The words were printed in bold black ink, spanning the width of the page, impossible to ignore. Below it, photographs of the ruined ministry atrium moved shakily, smoke still curling from the wreckage. A smaller moving image showed Cornelius Fudge himself, pale and shaken, addressing reporters with trembling words that none could misinterpret. Hermione's hands gripped the paper tightly as she read in the Gryffindor common room. The hush around her was unlike anything she had ever felt there before. Not a single student laughed or joked, not a single card was played. Even the fire crackled more softly, as though subdued by the tension hanging in the air. "Finally," Ron muttered, breaking the silence. His voice was thick with anger. "Finally the prophet stops calling Harry mad." Across the table, Harry sat rigid, staring not at the paper but into the flames. The announcement had not brought him relief. If anything, his scar ached worse, a reminder that Voldemort's presence was more real now than it had ever been. People might finally believe him, but that didn't erase the nights of being doubted, laughed at, whispered about. Hermione leaned closer, her voice gentle. "Harry, they know the truth now. That's a victory." Harry's jaw tightened. "It doesn't feel like one." A sudden flutter of wings filled the room as dozens of owls swooped through the tall windows, scattering letters and newspapers. Some carried messages from worried families, others bore orders from professors and aurors alike. The entire school seemed to stir with an energy that bordered on panic. Neville hurried over to their corner, his face pale but determined. "Everyone's talking about it. My Gran says we're to stay alert at all times. She reckons Hogwarts will be one of the safest places left." His hands fidgeted nervously, but his voice held a new steadiness. If you need help, Harry, I'll be there." Harry blinked, caught off guard. Neville had never spoken with such quiet conviction before. Something in him had shifted. Before Harry could respond, Professor McGonagall entered the common room, her tartan dressing gown flowing behind her. The usual sternness in her expression was shadowed by worry. "All students are to remain in the castle today. Classes are suspended. The headmaster will address the school at dinner." Her sharp gaze swept the room, softening for only a moment when it landed on Harry. "Stay together. You'll find strength in each other." The day passed in uneasy silence. Whispers echoed through the corridors, some fearful, others filled with grim excitement. Students clustered in groups, debating what Voldemort's return would mean. For the younger years, it was terror. For the older ones, it was the slow realization that the world beyond Hogwarts was unraveling. When evening fell, the great hall was packed tighter than ever before. The enchanted ceiling reflected storm clouds rolling across the sky, lightning flickering faintly in the distance. Candles flickered nervously in their holders as Dumbledore rose at the head table. His presence alone commanded the room. Every whisper ceased. Every breath seemed to pause. "You have all seen the prophet by now," he began, his voice calm but carrying easily. "You have heard the truth that for too long was denied. Lord Voldemort has returned." The name rippled through the hall like a shiver. Dumbledore's piercing blue eyes swept the students, lingering on the Gryffindor table where Harry, Hermione, and Ron sat side by side. This news brings fear, yes. But it must also bring resolve. Each of you must understand that this is not a battle fought by Aurors alone, nor by adults alone. We stand together, as a school, as a community, as a family. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Dark times lie ahead. But let me remind you, light has not gone out. It shines in each of you. And as long as we stand together, Voldemort will never know true victory. The hall erupted into murmurs. Some students clung to the hope in Dumbledore's words, while others trembled at the thought of war reaching even Hogwarts walls. Harry's heart pounded as he watched Dumbledore. He could feel the headmaster's gaze on him again, like a silent message meant only for him. A reminder, a warning, a responsibility. Hermione's hand brushed his under the table, a silent comfort. Ron leaned in closer, his voice low. Whatever comes, we'll face it. Together. Harry nodded, but inside he knew the truth. Dumbledore's words had been for all of them, yes. But the heaviest burden, the sharpest edge of the war, would fall on him. And though fear churned in his chest, another fire lit within him. Determination. The wizarding world had finally accepted Voldemort's return. Now the fight truly began. The days after Dumbledore's announcement brought sweeping changes to Hogwarts. It was no longer just a school where classes and Quidditch dominated the students' thoughts. The air felt heavier, as though the castle itself braced for what was coming. New protective enchantments shimmered faintly around the castle walls. Harry sometimes caught sight of faint ripples in the sky above the turrets, like sunlight on water, wards layered one over another. Aurors began to patrol the gates, their presence a reminder that danger was no longer distant. Every entrance and passage was reinforced, and even Peeves, normally gleeful in chaos, seemed unusually subdued, as though he too sensed the shift. For the students, the change was immediate. Professors began weaving lessons with practical defense strategies, even in subjects that had nothing to do with combat. Flitwick's Charms lessons now included shields and counterspells disguised as advanced coursework. Sprout introduced magical plants with defensive properties, teaching students how to recognize and handle them. Even Snape, grim as ever, spoke more of antidotes and emergency brews than obscure theory. The most drastic shift came in defense against the dark arts. With Umbridge gone and her decrees burned away with the Ministry's denial, Dumbledore appointed Tonks as the new instructor. Her hair shifted between shades of violet and bright turquoise as she paced the classroom, wand always in hand. "We're not here to recite definitions," she said on her first day, her voice brisk but warm. "We're here to prepare. You will learn spells that could save your lives, and the lives of others. Don't treat this as homework. Treat it as survival." The students leaned forward, wide-eyed. Harry, sitting near the front with Hermione and Ron, felt a strange surge of pride. For months he had been mocked for insisting that preparation was necessary. Now the very thing he had fought for was being drilled into every lesson. Hermione excelled as always, her wand movements precise, her spells sharp. Ron worked harder than ever, driven by the reality pressing down on them. And Harry found himself becoming something else entirely. His reflexes grew faster, his instincts keener. Tonks often called on him to demonstrate, and though he hated the attention, he could not deny how naturally the defensive magic came to him. Outside of lessons, however, the castle was uneasy. Younger students huddled together in common rooms, whispering rumors of Death Eater sightings and attacks across Britain. Some received owls with devastating news: relatives injured, businesses destroyed, families fleeing. There were quiet sobs in corners of the dormitories at night, muffled into pillows. One evening in the library, Hermione's face tightened as she read a letter from her parents. They urged her to come home, fearful of what the newspapers now described daily. She folded the parchment carefully, hiding the shaking in her hands. "You're not going, are you?" Harry asked softly. Her eyes met his, firm despite the worry. "No. If anything, I need to be here more than ever." Ron, who had been watching her closely, frowned. "My mum's the same. She wants us safe, but there's no such thing as safe anymore, is there?" Harry said nothing. He thought of Sirius's words, of Dumbledore's gaze, of the scar burning faintly at the edge of his mind. No, there was no safe anymore. At dinner the next evening, Dumbledore stood once again, his presence commanding as ever. "It has become clear," he said, that Hogwarts must be more than a school. It must be a sanctuary, a stronghold of resistance against the darkness. Each of you will learn. Each of you will train. But above all, each of you must hold fast to what makes this place special: friendship, loyalty, and courage. The words settled over the hall like a vow. Later, as the trio sat in the common room, Hermione's voice broke the silence. It feels like we're not just students anymore. Like we're soldiers. Ron shifted uncomfortably. I don't want to be a soldier. Harry stared at the flames, his thoughts heavy. We don't get to choose. Hermione reached out, her hand resting over his. For a moment, they were simply three friends again, leaning on one another in a world tilting into war. But deep inside, Harry knew what none of them could say aloud: that the battles ahead would be worse than anything they had yet faced. And the first of those battles was coming sooner than they realized. The first hints of danger came on a bitterly cold night when the snow had barely begun to fall outside the castle grounds. Harry had been tossing in his bed, unable to sleep, when the lightning bolt of pain seared across his scar. He sat up sharply, clutching his head as a flood of images broke through. Flashes of masked figures moving under moonlight, a dark forest, and a shadowy outline of a village with smoke curling above its rooftops. He staggered out of bed, heart racing, and stumbled down into the common room where Hermione was still awake, her books spread around her as usual. She froze when she saw him, her eyes wide with alarm. "Harry, what is it?" he gasped, trying to steady his breathing. "They're attacking. Death Eaters, somewhere near a village. People are screaming. I saw fire." Hermione dropped her quill at once. "We need to tell Dumbledore." Within minutes, they had shaken Ron awake and hurried to the headmaster's office. Dumbledore, as though expecting them, was already waiting. Fawkes crooned softly on his perch while the headmaster regarded Harry with grave intensity. "Describe what you saw," Dumbledore instructed, his voice calm but urgent. Harry relayed the vision, every detail etched vividly in his mind. Dumbledore's expression grew darker with each word. When Harry finished, the headmaster stood. "It is Godric's Hollow," Dumbledore said quietly. "A place of significance, and therefore a target. This cannot go unanswered." Hermione blanched. "But surely you don't mean—" "I do," Dumbledore interrupted gently. "The Ministry is slow to respond, and we cannot afford to wait. Harry, Hermione, Ron, your presence may be more vital than you realize. You three will come with me." Ron gaped. "Wait, you're taking us out there? To fight?" Dumbledore's eyes glimmered with both sorrow and pride. "You are no longer children shielded from the storm. You are part of this world, and this war. I will be by your side. But you must begin to see for yourselves what we face." Before they could protest further, he swept them toward the Flu network in his office. Moments later, they were engulfed in green flames, the castle vanishing behind them. They stumbled out into chaos. The night sky above Godric's Hollow was lit with fire, houses burning as villagers ran in panic. Death Eaters roamed the streets, their masks gleaming in the glow of destruction. Cries of anguish filled the air, punctuated by the sharp cracks of spells. Dumbledore raised his wand, a wave of silver light exploding outward to push back the nearest attackers. "Stay close," he commanded. Harry's blood roared in his ears. His wand was already in his hand, his instincts surging to the surface. He deflected a curse aimed their way, the force vibrating through his arm. Hermione cast protective charms, her shield shimmering brilliantly, while Ron fired jinxes that sent two Death Eaters sprawling. The village square became a battlefield. Harry caught sight of a figure, tall, hooded, with a cruel laugh echoing through the night. Bellatrix Lestrange. His heart lurched with fury, memories of Sirius flashing in his mind. She was dueling two villagers at once, her wand movements fluid and deadly. Dumbledore moved to intercept her, his magic so powerful that the very air seemed to tremble. But the distraction gave other Death Eaters the chance to close in on the trio. Harry ducked under a jet of green light, retaliating with a spell that disarmed his attacker. Ron dragged a terrified child out of harm's way, while Hermione conjured a chain of blazing ropes to bind two masked figures. It was chaos, terror, and fire all at once. And yet, through the adrenaline and fear, Harry felt something else burning within him: resolve. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting. He was fighting back. When the tide of the battle finally turned, Dumbledore's power radiating across the village like a shield of light. The Death Eaters fled into the night with cracks of apparition. Silence fell, broken only by the distant crackle of flames. Harry stood panting, sweat mingling with ash on his skin. His hands shook as he lowered his wand, the enormity of what they had just faced crashing over him. Dumbledore looked at them, his face etched with pride and sorrow. "You see now," he said softly. "This is what awaits us. And this is why we must be ready." The trio exchanged glances, their expressions pale but determined. They had crossed a threshold. There was no going back. The fires still smoldered in Godric's hollow as dawn crept over the horizon. Smoke curled into the pale sky, carrying with it the scent of ash and charred wood. Villagers, shaken but alive, moved among the ruins, gathering what little remained of their homes. The cries of children and the low murmur of grief hung heavily in the air. Harry stood amid the wreckage, his chest tight. He could still hear the echoes of screams, the flashes of green and red light seared behind his eyes. Hermione had soot smudged across her cheek, her hair wild and tangled, but her gaze was fixed on the people around them, her lips pressed together in determination. Ron sat on a broken stone wall, pale and trembling, his wand clutched tightly in his fist. Dumbledore, though weary, moved with purpose. He reassured the villagers, conjured supplies, and mended wounds where he could. His presence was a calm anchor in the chaos. Yet even his calm carried a weight. He had known this was coming, and he knew it was only the beginning. Harry felt a tug at his sleeve. A young boy with dirt-streaked cheeks looked up at him, eyes wide. You stopped them, didn't you?" the boy whispered. Harry swallowed, uncertain of what to say. He had fought, yes, but so much had still been lost. Before he could reply, the boy's mother rushed forward, pulling her son into her arms. She looked at Harry with gratitude and sorrow all at once. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Harry nodded stiffly, his throat too tight to speak. When they finally returned to Hogwarts, they were exhausted, their robes torn and faces grim. The castle, with its warm fires and quiet corridors, felt strangely distant, almost unreal compared to the devastation they had left behind. Word spread quickly. By the next morning, whispers followed them wherever they went. Students stared in awe and fear as Harry, Hermione, and Ron walked into the Great Hall for breakfast. Some Gryffindors looked at them with admiration, almost reverence. Others from Slytherin muttered darkly, their eyes sharp with suspicion. Neville slid onto the bench beside Harry, his voice low. "Everyone's talking about it. They say you three fought Death Eaters, real Death Eaters." Ron stabbed his fork into his eggs, his hand shaking slightly. "Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly glorious. It was bloody terrifying." Hermione glanced around the hall, her jaw set. "Let them talk. What matters is that people understand now. This war isn't far away anymore. It's here. And we have to be ready." But readiness came with a price. That night, Harry found himself tossing in bed again, the images of Godric's hollow refusing to leave him. The fire, the screams, Bellatrix's laughter, it all replayed endlessly. He buried his face in his pillow, wishing he could forget. A soft knock broke through his thoughts. The dormitory door creaked open, and Hermione slipped inside quietly. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed, her expression gentle but firm. "You're not sleeping either," she said softly. Harry shook his head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them. I hear them." Hermione reached out, her hand brushing his arm. "You saved lives, Harry. We all did. You can't carry only the weight of what we lost. That's exactly what Voldemort would want, for you to feel crushed by it." Her words sank into him slowly. He met her gaze, finding in it the strength he couldn't summon on his own. "Then how do we keep going?" he asked quietly. Hermione didn't hesitate. "Together. That's the only way." For the first time since the battle, Harry allowed himself to breathe a little easier. The fear didn't vanish, but it dulled, just enough to remind him that he wasn't alone. The war had touched them more deeply now. They weren't simply students preparing in theory. They were soldiers in a fight that had already begun. And they knew, with chilling certainty, that Godric's Hollow had only been the beginning. The days after Godric's Hollow were restless. News of the attack had spread far beyond Hogwarts. The Daily Prophet dedicated its front page to the devastation, though, as usual, it twisted the story. Instead of acknowledging that Voldemort's forces had been behind it, the article questioned whether radical groups of vigilantes were stirring unrest. Harry's name appeared, buried halfway down the page, with an insinuation that he had recklessly involved himself in matters beyond a schoolboy's comprehension. Ron nearly tore the paper in half at the Gryffindor table. What rubbish! You'd think we set the fires ourselves. Hermione's lips thinned as she scanned the article. This is deliberate. The Ministry doesn't want to admit Voldemort's followers are this bold. It makes them look weak. Harry didn't bother with the paper. He kept his eyes on his plate, though he wasn't eating. The image of the ruined village haunted him more than anything the prophet could print. Still, Hermione's words echoed in his mind. If the Ministry kept refusing to act, who would? Later that morning, Dumbledore addressed the entire school in the Great Hall. His voice carried clearly, every syllable heavy with the weight of truth. You have all heard whispers of what happened in Godric's Hollow. Let me assure you, the danger is real. Lord Voldemort and his followers are no longer content with shadows and secrecy. Their violence is bold, and it threatens us all. But Hogwarts will stand. Here you will be safe, and here you will learn to defend yourselves. Together, we are stronger than any dark power. The hall was silent, every student leaning forward. Dumbledore's blue eyes swept across the room, landing briefly on Harry before moving on. When the feast ended, a group of Ministry officials arrived at the castle. Their green robes and stern faces were impossible to miss. At their head was Dolores Umbridge, her saccharine smile out of place among the grim atmosphere. Harry's stomach dropped. Why is she here? Ron hissed as they watched her glide into the staff table beside Professor McGonagall. Hermione folded her arms, her brows knitting together. The Ministry must be panicking. They're sending her to keep an eye on Dumbledore, and on us. Her suspicion proved correct. That afternoon, notices appeared in every corridor. Students were instructed not to spread unfounded rumors, and all discussions of Godric's Hollow were to be handled responsibly through proper Ministry channels. Anyone caught engaging in fearmongering would face punishment. It was enough to set Gryffindor Tower buzzing with outrage. Seamus slammed the notice onto the common room table. Fearmongering? My uncle's shop was destroyed last week, and they're saying I'm not allowed to talk about it. Ginny's eyes flashed. They're not protecting us. They're silencing us. Harry felt anger boiling inside him. He stood abruptly, his fists clenched. They don't want people to know Voldemort's winning. But we were there. We saw it. We know the truth. Hermione looked around at the younger students watching, their faces pale but determined. She lowered her voice. If the Ministry won't prepare us, then we'll prepare ourselves. We can't afford to sit and wait. That night, in the Room of Requirement, the first unofficial meeting was held. Word had spread quietly but effectively. More than 30 students gathered, some nervous, some eager, but all united by the same need. Neville stood near the door, wand in hand, trying to look braver than he felt. Luna drifted among the group, her dreamy voice calming jittery first years. Harry faced them, the flickering torches casting shadows across the stone walls. He wasn't sure what to say. He wasn't a teacher, not like Lupin or Moody, but their eyes were on him, waiting. I'm not going to lie, he began, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Godric's Hollow showed us what we're up against. Voldemort isn't hiding anymore. He's destroying homes, families' lives. And the Ministry isn't going to save us. It's on us to fight back. To learn. To be ready when the time comes. There was a murmur of agreement, soft but growing. Hermione stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the group. We'll study spells properly. Not just what's in the textbooks, real defensive magic. Shield charms, disarming spells, counter curses. Everything the Ministry doesn't want us to learn. Ron grinned weakly. And maybe a few tricks they'd really hate. A ripple of laughter eased the tension. For the first time since Godric's Hollow, there was a spark of hope in the room. They weren't just students anymore. They were becoming something more, something Voldemort would come to fear. The Room of Requirement transformed itself into a practice hall, wide enough for dueling, but still warm with the glow of floating lanterns. The stone walls were lined with shelves of spellbooks, stacks of cushions, and even dummies for target practice. It looked as though the castle itself understood what they needed. Harry, Hermione, and Ron stood at the front, The group of students fidgeted with excitement and nerves, their wands gripped tightly. Neville hovered near the side, already determined to prove himself. Ginny's eyes shone with fierce resolve, while Luna hummed softly, utterly serene. Harry took a breath. We'll start with something simple but important, Expelliarmus. A disarming spell can save your life in a duel. It's not about looking flashy. It's about being smart. He demonstrated, his wand flicking sharply as he aimed at Ron. Expelliarmus. Ron's wand shot from his hand and clattered to the floor. Brilliant, Seamus muttered, clearly impressed. Harry gave a half-smile. All right, pairs. Try it yourselves. The room filled with voices as the students practiced. Some shouted too loudly, others fumbled their wand movements. A few spells sparked uselessly, while others worked with surprising force, sending wands flying across the room. Laughter mixed with groans of frustration. Hermione moved among them, adjusting grips and correcting wand angles. No, Susan, flick at the end, don't jab. Yes, like that. Perfect. Ron paired with Neville, who looked hesitant. After Ron's wand went flying 3 times in a row, Neville's face lit up with something close to pride. See, Ron said, grinning. You've got it. By the end of the session, most students had managed at least one successful disarm. Harry gathered them back into a circle. That's a start, he said, his tone steady. But it's not enough. Voldemort's followers won't fight fair. They'll use curses we can't even imagine. If we're going to stand a chance, we need more than just spells. We need to trust each other. To fight together. The words hung in the air. For a moment, the weight of what they were preparing for sank into everyone. Then Ginny spoke, her voice firm. Then let's do it properly. Week after week. No excuses. A chorus of agreement rose, quiet but strong. That night, as the others left in 2s and 3s, Harry lingered in the room with Hermione. The lanterns dimmed around them, and the silence was heavy. You did well tonight, Hermione said softly. They trust you, Harry. Harry frowned. I'm just a student. I don't know enough. She cut him off, her gaze sharp. You know more than anyone else here. You've fought him before. You've survived. That's why they look to you. And you're not doing this alone. We're all with you. Harry wanted to believe her. He almost did. But as they left the room, a sudden burning pain seared through his scar. He staggered, gripping the wall, the corridor spinning around him. Hermione gasped. Harry? He squeezed his eyes shut. The vision came in flashes, cold laughter, a long table, Death Eaters gathered in shadows. A name hissed from Voldemort's lips, cruel and certain. Diagon Alley. The vision snapped away, leaving Harry breathless. Hermione steadied him, fear etched in her face. What did you see? She whispered. Harry's voice was low but steady. He's going to attack again. This time it's Diagon Alley. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself sensed what was to come. Harry barely slept, the vision replaying in his mind over and over again. Voldemort's cold laughter. The shadowed faces of Death Eaters. The word Diagon Alley echoing like a curse. He sat at the Gryffindor table, untouched breakfast in front of him. Hermione studied him carefully while Ron picked at his food, clearly unsettled by Harry's silence. You have to tell Dumbledore, Hermione whispered urgently. Harry nodded, but his stomach twisted. The headmaster was away from Hogwarts again, chasing some lead only he understood. It meant Harry, once more, had to decide what to do with knowledge too heavy for a 16-year-old boy. By mid-morning, they slipped into Professor McGonagall's office. She listened intently, her lips pressed into a thin line. You are certain of this, Potter? She asked, her tone sharp but tinged with worry. Harry clenched his fists. I saw it. He's planning to attack Diagon Alley. Soon. I don't know when, but soon. McGonagall's eyes narrowed with thought. Then we must act swiftly. I will inform the Order at once. In the meantime, none of you are to leave the castle. Do you understand? They nodded, though Harry's gut churned. Waiting felt unbearable. 2 nights later, the news reached them anyway. Diagon Alley had been attacked. The Daily Prophet landed on the Gryffindor table with a thud, its headline screaming in bold black letters. Death Eater assault on Diagon Alley, casualties reported. Harry's hands trembled as he grabbed the paper. The moving photographs showed scenes of chaos, buildings in flames, terrified witches and wizards running, masked Death Eaters casting curses. Aurors fought desperately, but the article made clear the damage was done. Shops destroyed. Families shattered. Hermione's face paled as she read over his shoulder. Gringotts was targeted. So was Ollivander's. Madame Malkin's was reduced to rubble. Harry's heart clenched when he read the casualty list. Several names were unfamiliar, but one leapt out at him. Florian Fortescue, the kindly ice cream shop owner who had once given Harry free sundaes. Gone. Ron's expression was grim, his ears red with anger. This is just the start, isn't it? He won't stop until everything's ruined. The hall buzzed with frightened whispers as students read the headlines. Some openly wept. Others looked to Harry as though expecting him to have answers, to reassure them. But Harry only felt the crushing weight of failure. I should have done more, he muttered, shoving the paper away. Hermione grabbed his arm fiercely. Harry, no. You warned McGonagall. The Order knew. If you hadn't said anything, it would have been worse. You can't blame yourself for Voldemort's evil. But Harry barely heard her. The faces of the frightened crowd in his vision still haunted him, now matched with the truth of what had happened. That night, they met again in the room of requirement. The DA gathered in tense silence, the mood different now. There was no laughter during practice, no playful groans. The attack had made everything real. Harry stood before them, wand in hand. You've all seen the prophet. You know now what we're really up against. This isn't just about learning spells for exams. This is life or death. Voldemort isn't holding back, and neither can we. Neville stepped forward, his jaw tight with determination. Then teach us more. Not just disarming. Teach us how to defend properly. We need to be ready. Harry nodded. All right. Tonight we start with shield charms. Protego can block a curse, even a deadly one if your timing is right. As they trained, Harry's scar throbbed faintly, as if mocking him. Each flick of his wand, each shouted incantation, came with the reminder that Voldemort was moving faster, growing bolder. And Harry knew deep down, the war was only beginning. The following week passed under a strange, heavy silence. Diagon Alley's destruction hung over the wizarding world like a storm cloud, and Hogwarts felt different too. Students walked in tighter groups, laughter was rare, and even Peeves seemed subdued. Rumors ran rampant: who had been killed, who had escaped, which shops would ever reopen. Harry noticed the way younger students stared at him in the corridors, some with awe, others with fear, as if he were somehow responsible for both the prophecy and their safety. He hated it. The DA meetings became more intense. The room of requirement shifted itself to mimic a dueling hall, its stone floor echoing with the sound of spells and the crack of impacts. Shields shimmered in the air as students tried to master Protego. Sweat poured down faces, wands shook with effort, but the determination in their eyes had hardened. Again, Harry barked, pacing between pairs. Don't just block, think ahead. You need to be ready to counterattack. Neville managed to deflect Seamus's stupefy, though the force sent him stumbling back. He straightened with a flushed face but a small, proud grin. Better, Harry said with a nod. But keep your footing. One stumble and you're done for. Hermione, meanwhile, had taken it upon herself to teach advanced nonverbal magic, whispering reminders as students attempted to cast silently. Ron paired with Ginny, the two firing hexes at one another with alarming force. Ginny disarmed Ron 3 times in a row, smirking as he scowled. You've got to admit, Harry muttered, watching her, she's brilliant. Hermione gave a small smile. She's always been strong. People just underestimate her. Harry's heart swelled with something that wasn't just pride, though he quickly forced himself to focus. Outside the DA, the Order was moving fast. McGonagall announced in hushed tones during one of their check-ins that Aurors were now stationed around key wizarding sites. Hogsmeade was being reinforced, and Gringotts had increased its security to unprecedented levels. But Voldemort was unpredictable. While the Ministry scrambled to protect its most visible targets, Harry feared the Dark Lord would strike somewhere no one expected. That night, Harry's scar burned again. The pain was sharper, like knives cutting into his mind. He doubled over in the dormitory, gasping. Images rushed at him, dark figures, fire, a chilling laugh. Then, clear as day, Voldemort's voice. They think they can guard their alleys, their banks. Fools. We strike where their hearts are weakest. Harry shot upright in bed, sweat pouring down his face. Ron, who had been snoring moments before, stirred. "What? Harry? What's wrong?" "He's planning something else," Harry whispered hoarsely. "I don't know what, but it's not Diagon Alley this time. It's worse." The next morning, the prophet reported grim news. A small wizarding village outside London had been attacked. It wasn't famous, it wasn't wealthy. It was simply home. Families slaughtered. Homes burned. Children gone missing. Harry clenched the paper, so tightly it crumpled in his hands. He's not just after power. He's after fear. He wants to show no one is safe, not anywhere. Hermione's eyes shimmered with tears. He's sending a message. If he can attack a place like that, then nowhere is untouchable. Ron swallowed hard. So what do? We can't just sit here while he keeps doing this. Harry didn't answer at first. He felt the weight of all the eyes in the common room on him, watching, waiting, as if he might know the answer. He thought of his vision, of Voldemort's words, of the DA training until their arms shook. Finally, he said, "We get stronger. We don't wait for him to come to us. When the time comes, we'll be ready." Hermione leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Harry, that time is coming faster than you think." The DA was meeting almost every evening now. The atmosphere inside the room of requirement had shifted from secret club to military camp. The walls flickered with torchlight, shelves stocked themselves with spellbooks, and dummies lined the far side of the room, charred and broken from hours of practice. Harry drove them harder. He couldn't get the image of the destroyed village out of his head, the screams echoing in his scar. He knew Voldemort wasn't finished, and the DA needed to be ready before the next blow fell. "Stunners again," Harry called. "But faster this time. Don't hesitate." Students raised their wands, shouting spells in unison. Scarlet light crackled, shields burst, and those too slow fell with thuds onto the floor before scrambling up again. Ginny's aim was so precise that even Fred and George had started watching her with grudging respect. Neville, though often knocked flat, was learning to get back up faster each time. Luna's dreamy calm made her dueling unsettling. She rarely flinched, dodging with an odd grace that left her opponents frustrated. Hermione, meanwhile, had created a list of counter curses and hexes for them to memorize. She circulated with parchment in hand, correcting incantations and refining wand movements. Ron, despite his constant grumbling, was one of the most relentless in battle drills. "You're improving," Harry admitted at the end of one long session, as Ron wiped sweat from his forehead. Ron smirked weakly. "Guess it's easier when I imagine Malfoy on the other side of my wand." But Harry wasn't smiling. His scar had begun to pulse again, faint but growing sharper. That night the vision came. It dragged him from sleep, tearing him into Voldemort's mind. A long, cold hall stretched before him, lit only by green fire. Death Eaters stood in two silent rows, their masks gleaming. Voldemort sat on a high, twisted throne at the end, Nagini coiled at his feet. "We have struck their shops. We have burned their homes," Voldemort hissed, his red eyes glowing. "Now we take their sanctuary." A murmur ran through the Death Eaters. Bellatrix leaned forward eagerly. "Hogwarts, my lord?" No, Voldemort's voice was a serpent's whisper. "Not yet. Their school will fall in time. For now, we bleed them further. Their ministry clings to the illusion of control. We will rip it away. In one stroke, the world will know they cannot protect themselves." Harry's stomach dropped. He saw flashes, black smoke swirling above the ministry, curses flying through the atrium, wizards falling, terrified faces running in every direction. Voldemort stood, his pale hand rising. "The Ministry of Magic will crumble. Its walls will burn. And the boy will know there is nowhere left to hide." Harry wrenched himself awake with a gasp, clutching his forehead. His scar throbbed so violently it blurred his vision. Ron sat up at once. "Another vision? What did you see?" Harry's breath came fast. "He's going after the ministry. Soon." Ron's face paled. "Blimey." Hermione, who had been reading by wand light in the corner, dropped her book. "The ministry? Harry, are you sure?" Harry's voice was grim. "As sure as I've ever been. If we don't warn them now, it'll be another massacre." The three sat in silence, the weight of what Harry had seen pressing down like stone. They all knew the truth. Voldemort wasn't just attacking places. He was dismantling the wizarding world piece by piece. And the Ministry, with all its arrogance, might not believe Harry until it was too late. Harry, Hermione, and Ron sat together in the Gryffindor common room the next morning, the fire flickering low. It was still early, but none of them had slept much after Harry's vision. His words hung heavy in the air, and though the common room was silent, their minds were anything but. "We have to tell someone," Hermione said firmly, leaning forward in her chair. "If Voldemort's planning to attack the Ministry, they need to be ready. An ambush, protective enchantments, Aurors on alert, something." Harry frowned. "We've tried before. Every time I've told them something, they've brushed me off. They think I'm unstable, or that I'm trying to stir up panic. They'll never believe me." "That doesn't mean we don't try," Hermione pressed. "This isn't like before. You saw it clearly, didn't you?" Harry nodded grimly. Clear as day. He was in that hall with all of them. He meant it. Ron shifted uneasily. What if we don't tell them? I mean, think about it. If the Ministry is hit, maybe they'll finally see the truth. Maybe then they'll stop calling you a liar, Harry. Maybe it's what needs to happen." Hermione turned on him sharply. "Ron, are you even listening to yourself? We can't just let people die to prove a point." Ron raised his hands defensively. "I'm just saying. They don't listen to us, and if we keep running to them, they'll lock Harry away for good. You've seen how Fudge reacts. He'd rather silence him than admit Voldemort's back." Harry sat back, torn. Both of them were right in their own way. If they warned the Ministry and were ignored, nothing would change. But if they stayed silent, innocent lives would be lost. Finally, Harry stood. "We'll tell Dumbledore first. If anyone can convince the Ministry, it's him." Hermione nodded quickly. "That's the best plan. At least Dumbledore will believe you." Ron muttered, "If he's even around. Half the time he's off doing who knows what." But they didn't waste any more time. After breakfast, they marched to the headmaster's office, the password, courtesy of a friendly portrait, granting them entry. The spiral staircase carried them upward, and soon they were standing in the warm, cluttered room filled with whirring silver instruments and the soft hoot of Fawkes. Dumbledore looked up from a collection of parchment when they entered. His expression softened instantly, though his eyes flickered to Harry with sharp interest. "Harry, Hermione, Ron, I wondered when I might see you today." Harry wasted no time. "Professor, Voldemort is going to attack the Ministry. Soon. He told the Death Eaters last night. I saw it." The room went still. Even Fawkes gave a low, mournful trill. Dumbledore steepled his fingers, studying Harry's face. He did not doubt him. Harry could see that immediately, but his calm demeanor did not shift. "The Ministry of Magic is a fortress of bureaucracy, Harry. Even when presented with clear danger, those in charge may choose denial over preparation." Hermione interjected. "But if you warn them, if you tell them, surely they'll listen." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled faintly, though there was little humor behind it. "Cornelius Fudge has convinced himself that Voldemort's return is a fabrication, a tool to undermine his position. My words, however carefully chosen, may only harden that conviction." "Then what do we do?" Harry asked, frustration burning in his voice. Dumbledore rose and paced to the window, gazing out at the snow-dusted grounds. "We prepare. The Ministry may or may not heed a warning, but the order must be ready. Harry, I thank you for telling me. This vision may save lives." Ron scowled. "That's it? We just wait, while Voldemort marches on the Ministry." Dumbledore turned, his expression grave. "Ronald, sometimes the hardest choice is knowing when one cannot alter another's blindness. But rest assured, the order will act." Harry felt a pang of helplessness. He had hoped for more, some assurance that the Ministry would be fortified. Instead, he was left with the certainty that Dumbledore and his allies would carry a burden the rest of the wizarding world still refused to acknowledge. That evening, word spread through the castle that Dumbledore had left again. Whispers filled the corridors, and Umbridge prowled like a vulture, her eyes glittering with suspicion. "She knows something's up," Hermione muttered as they slipped back into the room of requirement. "She's been watching Dumbledore like a hawk for weeks," Harry agreed. "If she catches wind of what we're doing—" "We'll handle it," Ron interrupted, squaring his shoulders. "Let her try. She's nothing compared to what's coming." But even as the DA resumed training, Harry's mind wandered. His scar burned faintly, a reminder that time was running out. Voldemort's attack on the Ministry wasn't a distant threat. It was close, maybe days away. And when it came, the wizarding world would change forever. The first sign came in whispers. Students at breakfast traded rumors about strange disturbances in London. Unexplained explosions, shadows moving where none should be, entire streets plunged into darkness for seconds at a time. The prophet called them magical anomalies, but Harry knew better. His scar had been aching all morning, a dull, insistent throb that told him Voldemort was moving. In the room of requirement that evening, the DA trained with more intensity than ever. Spells crackled through the air, defensive charms sparking against conjured curses. Hermione had organized a rotation of drills, and even the younger students seemed sharper, as if they too sensed something looming. Again, Hermione barked as Neville's shield charm faltered under Ginny's hex. Neville gritted his teeth and raised his wand. This time the shield shimmered solid, the hex bouncing away harmlessly. Ginny gave a short nod of approval. "That's better," Harry said, forcing encouragement into his tone. "You've got to hold it steady, no matter what's coming." Ron muttered, "Easy for you to say. You don't sweat like a pig every time someone yells stupefy at you." But his joke fell flat. Everyone felt the tension pressing in. Before they could continue, the door to the room of requirement burst open. Luna stood in the frame, her wand tucked behind her ear, her usual dreamy expression replaced by urgency. "It's happening," she said simply. The room went silent. "What do you mean?" Harry asked, his heart already sinking. "The Ministry," Luna replied. "Father's quill just updated. Emergency reports are flooding in. They're under attack." A collective gasp swept the DA. Several students exchanged frightened looks. Hermione grabbed Harry's arm. "You knew it would be tonight." Harry didn't answer. He didn't need to. His scar was burning like fire now. Hours later, the truth spread like wildfire through the wizarding world. The Ministry of Magic had been stormed by Death Eaters. Dark curses filled its halls, corridors burned, and dozens of officials had fallen before reinforcements from the Auror office and the Order of the Phoenix drove the attackers back. The atrium itself was left in ruins, its golden fountain shattered into rubble. At breakfast the next morning, the great hall buzzed with fear. Even the Slytherins looked unsettled. Umbridge sat stiffly at the staff table, her face pale, her teacup trembling in her hand. The usual smug superiority was gone, replaced by something new dread. "They can't deny it anymore," Ron whispered, leaning close. "They'll have to admit it now. Voldemort's back." Hermione's eyes were fixed on the prophet spread out before her. The headline screamed Ministry attacked in night assault, dozens dead or missing. Beneath it, a grainy photograph showed Aurors carrying stretchers out of a blasted doorway. Harry said nothing. His mind was on the vision he had seen. The laughter, the cruelty, the certainty in Voldemort's voice. It had all come true. And though the Ministry had survived, something vital had shifted. Voldemort was no longer working in the shadows. His war had truly begun. That evening, as Harry sat by the fire in the common room, Dumbledore finally returned to Hogwarts. He looked older than Harry had ever seen him, his robes scorched in places, his expression grim. Yet when he caught Harry's eye, he gave the smallest of nods. "You were right," Dumbledore said softly once they were alone. "The Ministry is in ruins, though still standing. Cornelius can no longer deny the truth, no matter how hard he tries. Voldemort has forced the wizarding world into a choice. They will either face him or fall." Harry felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. The whispers, the visions, the training, all of it had led to this moment. And from here on, nothing at Hogwarts, nothing in their world, would ever be the same. The following morning, Umbridge returned to her usual seat at the high table with an expression as brittle as glass. She wore a new pink cardigan, its ruffles sharper than usual, as though she believed her clothing could disguise the fact that she had lost her grip on the school. She spoke little during breakfast, but her eyes darted constantly around the great hall, narrowing whenever she caught a student whispering. By mid-morning, she had snapped. Third years were in the middle of charms when the doors banged open. Umbridge swept in, her heels clicking loudly against the stone floor. Professor Flitwick looked startled, but stood aside as she barked, "All wands down. This lesson is suspended." Confused, the students obeyed. She glared at them with feverish intensity. "From this moment forward," she announced, her voice high-pitched and trembling with forced authority, "any gatherings not sanctioned by myself are forbidden. Any student caught meeting secretly, yes, I know of your little games, will face expulsion." The Ravenclaws looked scandalized. The Gryffindors stiffened. A Hufflepuff boy whispered nervously, but Umbridge silenced him with a glare. Then she smiled, saccharine and cruel. "Furthermore," she continued, "I will be increasing my patrols. I will know everything that happens in this castle. No lie can hide from me. No rebellion will take root here." She left as suddenly as she had come, her toad-like figure vanishing through the doors. The silence she left behind was thick with unease. Later that evening, Harry, Hermione, and Ginny gathered in the room of requirement with the DA. The mood was heavier than usual, but no one suggested canceling. "She knows," Hannah Abbott whispered, her face pale. "She knows about us." "She suspects," Hermione corrected firmly. "If she actually knew, she'd have shut us down already. We've been careful, and the room won't betray us." "But she's watching closer," Dean said. "If we keep meeting, we're risking everything." "We can't stop now," Harry said, his voice sharper than he intended. Everyone turned toward him. He felt the familiar pressure in his scar, the whisper of Voldemort's presence. "This is exactly what Voldemort wants. To make us too afraid to fight. We have to keep training." Neville spoke up next, surprising them all with his steadiness. "Harry's right. If we give up, then all we'll have left is fear. I don't want to live like that." The group murmured in agreement. Despite the danger, not a single student stood to leave. Training that night was fierce. Hermione pushed them harder on shielding charms, while Harry drilled them on stunning spells and disarming techniques. The room responded to their determination, shifting its walls into a wide dueling chamber, complete with enchanted targets that shot hexes back. The DA fought harder than ever, sweat dripping, sparks flying, voices echoing with shouted incantations. But as the session ended, Harry felt his scar throb violently. Images flashed behind his eyes. Umbridge's office, the door slamming shut, parchment scattered across her desk. And behind it all, a shadow, Voldemort's cold laughter reverberating inside his mind. Harry staggered, clutching his forehead. Hermione rushed to his side, eyes wide. "What did you see?" she asked. Harry looked around at the DA, every one of them waiting with bated breath. His voice came out low and grim. "He's watching. Voldemort knows something's happening here. And he's going to use Umbridge to find us." The room fell silent. Even the enchanted targets froze in place, their glowing eyes dimming. For the first time since the DA had begun, the possibility of betrayal felt closer than ever. Harry barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, the echo of Voldemort's laughter returned, crawling coldly through his mind. By morning, the throbbing in his scar had dulled but not faded, a constant reminder that the Dark Lord's attention was dangerously close. At breakfast, Harry noticed Umbridge was no longer seated stiffly at the high table as usual. Instead, she seemed almost smug, her smile wider, her eyes brighter, as though she'd received news that filled her with secret delight. Hermione caught it too and nudged Harry under the table. "She knows something," Hermione whispered. "Look at her. She's waiting for us to slip." Harry forced himself to eat, though every bite felt like lead. By midday, the truth of her new tactics became clear. The inquisitorial squad had been doubled. Draco Malfoy strutted through the corridors with a silver badge gleaming on his chest, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Pansy Parkinson trailed close behind, smirking at every Gryffindor who passed. They stopped random students, demanding to search their bags, and docked points at the slightest excuse. It was worse than ever. "They're turning the school into a prison," Ginny muttered furiously when they regrouped in the common room. "What's next? Chains on the doors?" Hermione frowned, her brow furrowed. "No, she's cleverer than that. She doesn't want to frighten parents with letters about locked doors or barbed wire. She wants control that looks like discipline. Subtle but suffocating." Ron groaned. "Well, it's working." Fred and George tried setting off fireworks again, and she had Filch waiting for them before they even lit the fuse. She's got spies everywhere. Later that evening, the DA attempted another meeting. Students filed nervously into the room of requirement, checking the corridor 3 times before slipping inside. The tension was thicker than ever. Harry felt the pressure of their gazes, the unspoken fear that one of them might already be betraying the group. He forced himself to speak with confidence. "We can't let this break us. She's trying to scare us into silence. That's exactly what Voldemort wants too. But we're stronger than that." Hermione stepped forward. "Tonight, we're focusing on advanced shield charms. If she sends anyone against us, we need to be ready." The practice was fierce. Students paired off, raising barriers of shimmering light as hexes and jinxes crashed against them. Neville held his shield longer than ever before, sweat dripping down his face, until finally it flickered and vanished. He grinned despite himself, and Harry clapped him on the shoulder. But then Harry's scar burned hotter than fire. His vision blurred, and he stumbled, nearly collapsing. Hermione caught him just in time. "Harry!" she cried, her voice trembling. "What is it now?" Through the haze of pain, Harry saw flashes. Umbridge's office, parchment covered in scribbles, her hand gripping a quill dipped in gleaming red ink. The words, Educational Decree Number 28, shimmered in his mind. And beneath it, one phrase stood out like a curse. "All student organizations are hereby disbanded." When Harry came back to himself, the DA was staring at him in terrified silence. "She's going to outlaw us," Harry said hoarsely. "Not just us, any group. She's going to make it illegal to even gather." Gasps rippled through the students. Hermione's face turned ashen. "If she passes that decree, the DA will be finished. We won't even be able to pretend we're just a study group." Dean spoke up, voice shaking. "So what do we do? Keep meeting and risk expulsion, or stop and lose everything we've worked for?" Harry looked around the room, at their determined, frightened faces, and felt the weight of leadership pressing harder than ever. His scar still ached, the phantom echo of Voldemort's laughter mocking him. "We keep fighting," Harry said finally, his voice firm. "If we stop now, she wins. Voldemort wins. We'll find a way to stay one step ahead of her. No matter what it takes." The DA nodded slowly, their fear tempered by resolve. But even as they resumed practice, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time, and that Umbridge was closing in faster than any of them realized. The announcement came the very next morning at breakfast. An owl swooped down with a heavy scroll sealed in red wax, which Umbridge dramatically unrolled at the high table. She cleared her throat, her sugary voice magnified by magic, so the entire great hall was forced to listen. "By the order of the High Inquisitor and with the full support of the Ministry of Magic," she began, her tone dripping with self-satisfaction, "Educational Decree Number 28 is hereby enacted. All student organizations, societies, teams, and gatherings are henceforth disbanded. Any continuation of such activities will be met with immediate investigation and the severest of consequences." Gasps and mutters filled the hall. The Quidditch teams froze in disbelief, while the prefects exchanged anxious looks. Even Percy Weasley, who usually praised ministry decrees, seemed uneasy. Umbridge raised her voice over the noise. "All students must submit to questioning should there be suspicion of unlawful assembly. Know this, nothing will escape the eye of the ministry." She rolled up the decree with a snap, smiling smugly as though she had just won a battle. Harry's fists clenched under the table. He caught Hermione's gaze and saw the same fury blazing there. Ron muttered angrily, "She can't ban Quidditch. That's the only thing keeping people sane." But by lunchtime, the Gryffindor team had already received notice that their practices were cancelled indefinitely, their brooms confiscated until further notice. Angelina Johnson stormed into the common room, throwing the parchment onto the table. "She's destroying everything," Angelina cried. "First the Quidditch team, now the DA. What's left for us?" Hermione picked up the parchment, her eyes narrowed. "She's trying to crush every bit of unity we have. Voldemort divides to conquer. She's doing the same." That night, the DA gathered in secret once more, though the tension was higher than ever. The room of requirement had provided not only cushions and training dummies, but a great notice board on which Hermione had scrawled plans and countermeasures. "We can't stop meeting," she told them firmly. "If we stop, then all of this, every spell we've learned, was for nothing." "But how?" Cho asked, her voice edged with worry. "She'll know. She's watching everything." Hermione tapped the notice board. "We'll meet in smaller groups, in different places, at different times. No fixed schedule. No predictable patterns. The room will help us, but we have to be smart. Zacharias Smith crossed his arms. Sounds like a good way to get caught. Neville spoke up before anyone else could respond. Then let her try. I've learned more here than I ever have in class. I'm not giving that up. His voice was steady, stronger than Harry had ever heard it. Several others murmured their agreement. Harry felt a swell of pride. He stepped forward. We'll be careful, but we'll keep fighting. She wants us silent. We won't give her that satisfaction. They practiced late into the night, breaking into small groups, rehearsing shield charms, disarming spells, and defensive maneuvers until they could cast them almost without thinking. The room shifted to accommodate, creating multiple corners and alcoves so students could train separately without crowding. When they finally dispersed, Harry walked back to the tower with Ron and Hermione. The corridors were unusually dark, torches flickering as though the castle itself shared their unease. Harry's scar tingled faintly, not sharp but constant, as if Voldemort was stirring restlessly far away. Hermione broke the silence. She thinks she's won. But all she's done is show us how much we need this. The DA isn't over, Harry. It's only beginning. Harry looked at her, then at Ron, who gave a determined nod despite his lingering scowl. For the first time that day, Harry allowed himself a small smile. The DA would survive. They would adapt. And when the time came, they would be ready. The end came faster than anyone expected. For weeks, the DA had managed to stay hidden, practicing in small groups, using secret signals and the Room of Requirements protections. Confidence grew again, and though the risk of discovery loomed, the students found strength in their lessons and in one another. For Harry, Ron, and Hermione, those stolen evenings were what kept them from despair. But then one night, the room betrayed them. Or rather, someone had betrayed them. It began with a sense of unease. The Room of Requirement, instead of opening smoothly at Harry's whispered command, resisted for a moment longer than usual. Once inside, the space felt strange, too still, too heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Harry shook it off. Let's get started. Shields first. They had barely begun when the door burst open. Dolores Umbridge stormed in with a squad of Inquisitorial Squad members behind her, including Draco Malfoy, his face alight with triumph. A heavy scroll glimmered in her hands, the new decree glowing with enchanted authority. Well, well, Umbridge crooned, her voice dripping with venomous delight. What have we here? Illegal gatherings. Rebellious children. Dangerous subversions of ministry law. Gasps and shouts filled the room as students instinctively raised their wands. But the DA had trained too well, no one panicked. Hermione's wand was steady, Neville stepped in front of the younger students, and Harry's scar flared hot with anger. We're not doing anything wrong, Harry snapped. We're learning to defend ourselves. Something you're too afraid to teach. Umbridge's smile widened, her eyes glittering with cruelty. Oh, but you were doing something very wrong, Potter. Plotting. Defying authority. Forming an army against the ministry. It's not an army, Hermione shot back, her voice shaking with fury. It's survival. Silence. Umbridge screeched, her sugary tone breaking into a shrill shriek. She raised her wand, aiming directly at Harry. For a heartbeat, time froze. Then the DA moved as one. Spells lit the air, crackling across the room. Shield charms collided with stunners, disarming spells flew toward the Inquisitorial Squad, and chaos erupted. Malfoy barely had time to duck as Ginny's bat-bogey hex soared past his head. The room itself shifted wildly, creating barriers and cover, as though it too resisted Umbridge's intrusion. Students darted behind conjured walls, their training shining through the panic. Protego! Harry roared, blocking a hex meant for Luna. Ron stunned Crabbe clean off his feet, while Neville's stunning spell sent Goyle sprawling. For the first time, the Inquisitorial Squad realized they were outmatched. But Umbridge was relentless. She bellowed curses with wild fury, scattering students left and right. She wasn't strong, but her sheer rage made her dangerous. Enough, she screamed. Her wand trembled with power. I will not allow you to defy me another second. Hermione grabbed Harry's arm. We have to go now. But Harry hesitated. This was their fight, their secret, their unity. He couldn't let her destroy it. He raised his wand again, his voice steady. Expelliarmus. The spell struck true. Umbridge's wand flew from her hand, clattering across the floor. Gasps rang out from every side. For once, she looked small, trembling with fury and disbelief. But the victory was fleeting. From behind her robes, she pulled another parchment, glowing even brighter than before. The educational decree bore the seal of the minister himself. "By the full authority of the Ministry of Magic," she hissed, "Harry Potter, you are expelled from Hogwarts." The room fell silent, every student frozen in horror. Harry stood there, heart pounding, staring at the parchment that seemed to burn in her hand. Around him, the DA tightened their circle, wands raised, refusing to abandon him. And in that moment, Harry realized something. Expelled or not, discovered or not, they were more than just a secret club. They were a resistance. They were ready. The DA had begun, and it would not end here.